Hi.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, my friends, once again, it is indeed time to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J. Stan McCauley, along with the champions of talk. And we've got Monday Morning Talk champion in here, Jonathan Small, joining us in Studio 1A. Morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Doing fine, Stan. It's good to be back here again. Like I mentioned every single week, I look forward to this particular day and time and show. And pretty much getting close to the end of August.
Yeah, time is pressing on. It's pressing on.
Yeah, it's like, we're going up and down. You're getting little teas of autumn feel, but then it gets back to summertime. So, it's been an up and down summer. Some hot days, some nice days, cool days. I think we're even going to get a little rain today, finally.
Yeah, I was out driving around yesterday, and it became abundantly obvious that we got some issues here with the rain. Everybody's lawn is like brown.
Brown, exactly.
Brown. It's like, wow, we're folk lawn dying.
Yeah, you need water. Grass needs water.
Yeah.
It's just we just haven't had much rain. I don't know if that's obviously it's not a good thing. Sometimes we get too much rain, then now we get no rain. So how do you balance it off? It's going to have an impact on the autumn foliage going into the autumn time. It's not going to be as colorful, I think, from what I'm hearing. I'm not 100% sure. But hopefully, we get enough rain to cover us through and, just stay abreast of what's going on, climatize. And pretty much, I guess that's normal. You stay busy over the weekend.
Yeah, very busy. I was busy. We went out. What did we do? I covered a community event at Kamara's Cultural Corner. It was a play. It was really interesting. It was a good play.
I looked at that online.
It was a good play. You watched it?
I watched it online. I said, I was working that day, so I said, let me take a look at it online. And one thing I noticed is, I don't know if it was portraying Africa, but I looked on the video, you could see the trees blowing.
Yeah. It was windy.
Oh, so that actually wasn't some type of stage event. Sometimes you wonder, you watch a TV movie, they trying to portray, but it was actually the wind blowing.
No, the wind was nice. It was really nice. It was breezy, windy, and it's over on Sterling Street, 75 Sterling Street, and there's a big field, and they've done a lot of creative things over there. So it's a nice performance space among other things that go on.
Yeah, I thought that might have been a little stage, though. It's trying to portray what it's like in Africa, and
that could be part of the ambiance they were trying to create. There was a stage there. Nice sound. Everything was was done quite nicely.
Well, that's good. The wind just happened to be blowing, because it kind of make you feel like you was in that, like an Africa's type of performance. So
it did have that feel. 10 women from the African diaspora talking about their experiences and how they're different yet similar. It was windy, so I said, well, let me establish the fact that it is windy by people seeing the trees blow.
Yeah, I kept watching the trees blow, because that day looked like it was a hot day. I mean, not really hot, but I can't remember the wind blowing that day. Maybe I wasn't paying attention.
No, it was those were The trees at the moment, yeah.
At the moment. So that kind of made it look even more impressive, you know, the whole performance when you see the trees blowing back and forth and everything. So, the African culture, I think some areas of the Geechee in the South Carolina, Georgia, the Georgia Sea Islands, they have a lot of African traditions. The history is more connected there, although it's changing now. But that might be the closest area in the United States that you got some of the historical African descendants and people. I mean, the Geechees, what's the other name that they call them? Geechees is one, and there's another name that they call them too. I can't think of it. But South Carolina and Georgia, those are the two big areas of the country that still have that isolated area of African. Actually, they even have somewhat of a Caribbean dialect if you listen real closely to the Geechees.
In their conversation.
Yes. I tried to book a guest from the Geechees one time, just couldn't get any feedback or no response because I wanted to get into that type of history. But you never know; anything is possible. You can still
it's still always possible. Football's back. So,
NFL, it's getting close. It's
preseason.
Preseason, I mean, I kind of back off into the NFL season. I hate
September.
September, yes. Preseason, I mean, you got to be careful. You can get a key injury to your star player. It's just a risk. You know, I wish they would go to just 3 games, and 1 game, home game, neutral game, and a road game.
For preseason.
For a preseason. And
how many games do they play during preseason?
Usually 5, the max, because they have the Hall of Fame game. 4 games minimum, 5 if you play the Hall of Fame game. Many teams are going to 5 games. And you have a 17-game NFL season now, so it goes right into probably the first week in August, and then the NFL starts, I believe, September the 8th.
That's September 8th, yes.
And I think the Cowboys are playing Tampa Bay again. The Cowboys are playing Tampa Bay. We played them last year, and that's obviously I think Tom Brady's going to miss the first 2 games. I thought I heard that on a radio show this past week. I'm not sure what.
Buccaneers have a new coach.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
A new head coach. That's what we were watching yesterday, and they're giving a head lineup of all the coaching changes and new coach for the Buccaneers. I don't remember his name, but
did the other coach get fired?
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to look into this.
That's all new to me. I wasn't.
Yeah. So I will double check while we're on the air. And see. But we're not here this morning to talk about football.
Right.
We're going to talk about something much more interesting. And so, of course, we have our special guest for Monday, as we do every Monday, someone from around the country, around the world, expert in their subject matter. And today's no difference. And so this is going to be a great show because this is an area of extreme interest to me.
I figured that.
And so we will have fun listening to this and joining in the conversation. So we call these our mini masterclass series of conversations. So Jonathan, being the official booker of guests, we always let him have the pleasure of introducing our guests. So Mr. Small, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, good morning to people out there on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show. We have a guest this morning in the aviation industry, Aviation Expert, and this whole format is going to be designed to give an insight on the aviation industry. The guest this morning is a former commercial pilot, and he is also an aviation expert consultant, I believe based out of the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area of the country, no other than Captain Richard Levy. Good morning, Captain Levy. How are you doing?
Good morning, Jonathan, and good morning, Stan. Great to meet you two fine gentlemen. I'm so very impressed with your TV show on this early time in Monday morning, and I liked what Stan just said a moment ago. Anything is possible. Let's when we wrap up the show, let's talk a little bit about that. So if there's any young people listening, that we can encourage them to go after their goals, the moon and the stars, which we were just talking about a few minutes ago. But any event, it's great to talk to you. And in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we are getting heavy rain showers, like you two gentlemen talked about. In many parts of the United States, it's very dry. It's starting. Everybody can be very hopeful and optimistic. The weather is changing. Rain is coming your way eventually. Anyway, good morning, gentlemen. You two look great, and I'm looking forward to having a great hour with you all.
Okay.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, okay. Likewise. Captain Levy, could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background before we get into our topic of discussion?
Sure can, Jonathan. I started flying before a lot of your listeners and viewers were born, probably 1967. At 14 years old, I took my first flying lessons in Houston, Texas, and I paid for my entire flying training. And then at age 16, had to wait for the 16th birthday, according to the federal law, and it's still the same, that I could fly by myself. And at age 17, I could begin, pass the test to begin flying passengers. Age 18, on that birthday, I got received my commercial license. That's not commercial aviation. That's a commercial to allow somebody to begin basically teaching flying, which I did during college at University of Texas in Austin. And during those 3 to 4 years at college, I taught and flew charters. Charters meaning, for those who are familiar with aviation, somebody calls up and doesn't want to wait on the airline. They want to go at an unusual time or spontaneously from Texas to Mississippi or New York or across the state of Texas. And they pay more money, but they get to pay somebody like me or many other people like me. And I get to build up my flying experience. So I completed the University of Texas in 3 years, not because I'm an extreme genius, because I went to summer school all the way through. And a year after graduation from University of Texas with a degree in transportation, I went into the Air Force and flew transports called the C-130. This is after the Vietnam War was completed. And then in 1977, I was interviewed and hired by a major airline, one of the largest in the world. And I flew with this major airline with honor and pleasure from 1977 until I turned to age 65. Those are the federal laws that you have to retire at age 65. And in that time period, I flew, of course, all across the United States, Central America, South America, Japan, China, Asia, Korea, Russia. And as we talked about before the show started, we crisscrossed the North Pole many, many times, which sometimes is the shortest route time-wise, not miles-wise, but wind-wise, to get to places like Russia or India or Asia. It depends on the route. So that took me up to retirement. Age 65, had to hang up the uniform. And then I changed to another airline where I'm working now, and I'm a flight instructor called the Flight Crew Train Instructor. And what that means in plain, simple English is I teach with about 250 other colleagues, men and women from all kinds of backgrounds, in the classroom, pilots, brand new pilots, and pilots come back for what we call recurrent training. Every airline in the world conducts recurrent training, so that the pilots are evaluated in their knowledge and are also brought up to speed on the latest changes in procedures. One thing's guaranteed in aviation: to keep it safe, there's always a better way to operate. There's always better procedures to be more efficient, not only for safety, which is number one, but two, costs, to keep costs down, save fuel. So I work in the classroom with pilots, and I also work in the flight simulator. Simulator is, for those who are unfamiliar with a simulator, it's the flight deck of an airplane. And we have, where I work, every major airline has 20 to 30 of them. And we close the door, dim the lights, start the engines. You have no idea that you're actually in a building. It is 100% real and authentic. And we can test people, train them, and then give them more complicated problems like engine failures, flying through turbulence, how to fly safely, how to avoid the risk and minimize risk and keep safety on top of in mind, in your attitude, and in your conversation at all times.
Okay. Well, very impressive background, Captain Levy. Very impressive bio. Obviously, you are an expert in the field of aviation. There's been a lot of changes over the past 50 years of your experience in the aviation industry. I think there's a combination that people need to be aware of the airlines and the airports itself, but they do have to go hand in hand. But basically, when you got started in the aviation industry, what was the biggest challenges and the biggest issues, I guess, involved in the aviation? I know there's been a lot of changes afterwards with deregulations, 9/11, and we'll get into that. But when you got started in the aviation industry, what were some of the biggest issues and challenges that you was able to witness?
The biggest challenge, really, it's a super good question, Jonathan. The number one challenge, it started with the Wright brothers in 1903, continued through with Richard Levy in 1967, and all the way to my last retirement flight from Hong Kong back to the United States in 2018. And that is to enjoy. All of us, I haven't found really anybody who does not have a passion and love aviation who flies for a major airline or in the corporate world, wherever anybody is flying, or a private aircraft. Most of us love it. It's a passion. With that passion, the challenge is to keep safety number one in mind. There's always going to be challenges. I don't care how sophisticated the airplanes get with navigation technology, and they are getting more and more sophisticated. For example, airplanes can land automatically. Sometimes the pilots have to help them with what we call heads-up display, HUD for short. Most airplane I retired on, large aircraft, very heavy weight-wise, could land with the computers and land not 0-0, but almost 0-0. And the only limitation has to do with taxiing the airplane. But the challenge then, as now, even irrespective of 9/11, the regretful events of 9/11, security is number one, but on top of that is safety. How do we minimize the risk? Weather is always going to be a challenge. Airplanes are safe. They operate well. We can even sometimes operate the airplane with a component or two inoperative if it doesn't affect safety. And we have books that we refer to they've been approved by the manufacturer, whether it's generally built by Airbus or built by Boeing. It says, yes, you can operate with one of these four components inoperative, but you can't operate with two of them inoperative. And I'm making that up, of course. And then you check with our flight dispatchers and our maintenance departments. Do you agree with that with this component inoperative that we can safely fly today? Now, that I'm making it basic and simple for your viewers. It's not that really complicated. And we know intuitively that if there is a component that's inoperative, pretty much we know right away, is it a good idea or a bad idea? But the manufacturer tells us this. And for the airlines that are certified and based in the United States, the Federal Aviation Administration has also approved the manuals. So that is the biggest challenge. Keep a confident safety consciousness in your mind at all times. Work together with your crew, not only the crew on the flight deck, but the flight attendants in the back of the aircraft. Flight attendants are very important. Why are they important? They're the eyes and ears of what's going on in the back of the airplane. If you have 300 people in the back of the airplane, and if there's a behavior issue back there that we didn't know about, or they look out at the wing and they see something unusual, maybe a passenger has told the flight attendant, hey, would you advise the pilots? I see such and such out there. They call us, we make a decision, we talk about it, talk with the company, or we apply our emergency procedures. And if there's something that has to be decided immediately, we call that immediate action item. And then we go to a checklist. And if it's really serious, we need to make a landing at the nearest suitable airport. So that's the biggest challenge. And we love that challenge. Mm-hmm. And because we learned how to deal with that. And not all of them are vanilla, and as they are in the simulators, sometimes they're in a gray area. You still use your background and your knowledge and all your resources to make a super safe and correct decision. Do we need to land right away? Maybe there's a medical situation in the back of the airplane. So we get medical advice. What do you think, Mr. or Doctor, Mrs. or Mr. Doctor? Do you think we should land right away? Sometimes we don't have time to call a doctor because the flight attendant says the person is losing their life. They've had a heart attack. They have breathing difficulties. So we need to find the nearest suitable airport and put the airplane on the ground, declare emergency. And when we declare emergency, they basically clear everybody out of our way. And that means you are number one for the airport. You can use any runway you want, get the airplane on the ground. Follow your procedures, follow your checklist, and everybody will be just fine.
All right, Captain Levy, we're going to have a lot of questions. I know, Stan, I'm going to bring you into this a little earlier this morning because I know you're real interested and, you have experience in this field firsthand. But I just have one more question I would like to ask Captain Levy. Captain Levy, you had just mentioned, there's a big component of a team orientation of people working together. But there's been a lot of controversies in the aviation industry over the past few decades. And briefly, could you just kind of let people know your opinion? Was the strike by the air traffic controllers a mistake? And I believe former President Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. Do you know enough about that to elaborate on what led up to the air traffic controllers striking, I believe, sometime in the early 80s?
Oh, Jonathan, I have. I lived through it. I worked through it. I was there. I was based at Chicago O'Hare International Airport in 1981 when the controllers struck. And in fact, I lived in the suburbs of Chicago, and I had a townhome and rented out for extra income. We all like money, and one room was rented out to a pilot who worked for the same major airline, and the other room was rented out to an air traffic controller working at Chicago O'Hare. And that person decided not to strike. Now, what I can't get into is labor relations and negotiations, and that is way over with, that controller strike. Why the controllers went on strike? That there's two sides to that story, and that one I will never get involved with. Nor in labor, airline pilots or flight attendants or mechanics. Each side, as you two gentlemen, distinguished gentlemen, know, there's two sides to every story, and so I will probably yield from getting involved with the reasons for the strike, but I'm intimately aware of it. I know the effects it had on the industry at that time. In fact, when the controllers had to be replaced, there was a contraction of some of the major airlines. Some of the airlines had to ground some old, inefficient airplanes. So that was good news in a backwards way, unexpected way. Inefficient, fuel-wise airplanes that were now too costly to operate. So the reason President Reagan hired new controllers was basically there was a shortage of controllers. And why this friend of mine decided to continue working, it wasn't always pleasant for him, but that was a personal decision. And he went on to become an expert in his own way. But I do know controllers on both sides, some who did decide to strike and some decided to continue working. And that certainly was a personal labor relation issue and decision that each side probably was right in certain ways, Jonathan.
Okay, well, that's fair enough, Stan. I mean, fair enough, Captain Levy, to give your answer. The way you did, you don't want to get into the labor and the legal aspects of it, which that's kind of what I would love to hear, but I guess you got your legal reasons for not elaborating on that, so we can leave it at that at best. Stan, you have some questions you want to ask Captain Levy, or any comments you want to make?
Well, no, I'm enjoying the conversation. My daughter's a flight attendant, so
tell her congratulations.
I will. She loves it, and so
tell her how important she is. She's extremely important.
Yeah, I think that because what they deal with the passengers, and then so they're critical importance to the team, and as you mentioned, it's a team effort. And then my dad was in aviation as a mechanic. He actually was the director of maintenance for Altair Airlines, if you go way back. And then I worked for Pratt & Whitney for many, many years. So my whole family's in aviation. We love planes. But no, I'm enjoying the conversation. We have some time left, so I'll wait, because some of the stuff it's interesting, at least to me, particularly here in the Hartford area, is more along the lines of some general aviation things with pilot training. And you were talking about how you learned to fly at 14 and then got your solo license at 16. And the pipeline to pilots, the pipeline to pilots in commercial aviation, and a little bit about how important it is for young people to get into the field.
Oh, I will tell you, both of you, Jonathan and I talked about this in a previous conversation. There's a shortage of pilots right now. And I say that that's good news for the young men and women out there who have a dream and aspiration to go into commercial aviation, like I did for being with a major airline, the first one at least, for over 41 years, and now being with this other airline almost 4 years. Pardon me for using a cliche, but the sky's the limit. The stars are the limit. That is, the requirements to become a commercial aviation pilot. There's still minimum requirements that will never change. You've got to have some background. Although the Europeans do it differently. They have a different philosophy. My second language is German. So I've worked with, over my career with this major airline, I've worked with Lufthansa, Swiss Air is called now Swiss, and Austrian Airlines, and they hire pilots with some of them with military experience, but some of them with zero experience. It's called ab initio training, where they get tons of classroom hours and then many hours in the simulator. That system works. It's safe. It absolutely works wonderfully. In the United States, at this point, there's still enough supply through the pipeline from the military and from the civilian and corporate world to feed the major airlines. But those numbers are rapidly shrinking, the available pilots. So it does not matter your background, what family you come from, sex, anything. What matters is an aptitude. Of course, physically, you've got to meet the requirements of an FAA physical, and the aviation background. And the requirements, the amount of hours one needs to get hired is decreasing, but not to the point where there's going to be affected by safety. You still, whenever one gets hired at a major airline nowadays, it doesn't matter which major airline it is, you have to pass rigorous examinations. And majority of the people make it. And there's some who are not cut out for it, and we encourage them to go maybe in a different direction there. But still, the mandatory retirement age, like I experienced 4 years ago, is age 65. Can't work one day after that for a commercial major airline, that is. And there's talk about moving the age to almost age 68 For example, as I understand, in the Philippines, you can fly domestically to age 68, Japan, age 68. I'm not positive in Canada, it's the same or longer than that, but you can't fly internationally. Internationally, the rule has not changed, and I don't know if there's an appetite to change it. Gets back into my dear friend Jonathan's question about labor, gets involved there. There's different views on somebody flying above age 65, older than that. And that's something we could talk about at a different time, a different show. But there is, nevertheless, there's a shortage, and it is growing very acute, which by the spring of next year, every major airline will still be hiring pilots, and they will probably be decreasing the amount of hours that a pilot has to have to apply for the job. Not necessarily be accepted, but to apply.
Well, Captain Levy, you mentioned that there's a shortage of airline pilots, and I think there could be a shortage of other areas in the aviation industry. I mean, you didn't mention anything about air traffic controllers. I think I've heard reports that flight attendants, some of your airlines, your major airlines, don't have enough staff. It's causing some frictions in some areas of traveling for people. I don't know all of the ins and outs. But one thing, let's talk about, if you can elaborate, is what is the wages? I mean, how much on average does a commercial pilot earn per year? How much on average does, let's say, an air traffic controller average per year, if you know those two answers?
Well, excuse me. Well, the air traffic controllers, I'm unfamiliar with their salaries, but I can only assume, I think with some degree of security in my answer, that, excuse me, they are compensated very, very well. And why is that? Very simple. There's extreme risk and challenge in being an air traffic controller. You could be working in a control tower of a small airport with low volume of traffic as a beginning controller, or you could be working at Atlanta Hartsfield or Chicago O'Hare international airports in a tower, control tower, which they clear you to taxi, clear you to take off, clear you to land, and are downstairs underneath the ground in what we call the TRACON, the Terminal Radar Approach Control. And that's the radar. And it's complicated. There's lots of federal aviation regulations to comply with, but most important, they have to know the airspace. They have to memorize the taxiways in the airspace. Get back to your question, with that responsibility. And also there is a burnout factor, and I'm not an expert in the air traffic control field, but I do know controllers that generally around in the age, and from age 50 on, they maybe take a well-funded retirement, and or they go into management and become a management controller and help write procedures. And I know some of those. I know one up at Chicago, for example, that I've talked with at O'Hare Airport. So the controllers are compensated well, definitely in 6 digits. Where it is in the 6 digits, I really do not know, but they are recruiting controllers, and my assumption is the compensation is sufficient. Now, if you had a controller on your show right now with me, sitting next to me, he or she would say, we are worth more money. And they have a right to say that. Everybody has a right to say that. And they will earn more money. Again, I'm not an expert on their salaries or their labor negotiations. As far as pilots, very interesting question. I'm not allowed to speak to the contract at different major airlines that I'm familiar with, but I will tell you this, that I do have knowledge of pilots nowadays at about 3 major airlines I'm thinking of, and that's just a sample of the major airlines U.S. making a lot of money, of course, legally and ethically with the contract. Why is that? Why can they make extra money? And you can only fly so many hours. There's limitations on the union contract, and there's limitations with the federal aviation regulations. That being said, There are offers when a flight is in the risk of being canceled because they're shortage of pilots. They will basically pay overtime. And a term that's used at some major airlines is premium pay. But nevertheless, they'll call you Stan at home, and then they'll start with you, or they'll start with Jonathan and say, "Hey, we see you have a day off today, tomorrow, and the next day we have a flight open to Frankfurt, Germany, and we have no coverage there. We will offer you premium pay," or whatever terminology they use. Each airline has their own little words. We'll pay you premium, which is maybe double, triple. I don't really know because I'm retired in that respect. And they'll say, "Stan, would you be willing to take that trip to Frankfurt? And we'll offer you premium pay, double, triple, whatever." And Stan says, "I was going to go to see a play, but I think it's worth my time to be paid triple. I will take that flight to Frankfurt, and I will see that play with my daughter next Wednesday instead of this weekend," or whatever. There's an example there. Or Jonathan, you would say the same thing if you were offered that. That's why pilots are making very, very good income if they make themselves available to pick up flights when there's such a shortage and a risk of cancellation, that they offer the premium pay. Trust me, a lot of money.
Okay. Well, I mean, the whole aviation industry, Captain Levy, is real broad, and the airlines obviously is one component of the aviation industry. The airports obviously run, I guess, a little bit differently. I mean, they have contracted services at most of your airports now. I don't think too many airports you would actually work for directly. I think if it's run by certain authorities, then you would be actually working for the authority. But it's a little complex to really figure out how, the whole employment structure is set up for every particular category that you see in operations. The wages, obviously, I'm assuming we're talking six-figure wages for a pilot. Stan, I think you would assume an airline mechanic could be making close to six figures, 75, 80,000 on average, let's say. So that's a pretty good compensation, I would say, for an aircraft mechanic. But I think the thing is, Captain Levy and Stan, when you hear Congress bailing out the airline industries, 9/11 was one example where they had to do something. I think there was another bailout in the 2008 recession, and currently 2 years ago with the pandemic, there was another bailout. Is it justified, Captain Levy, and even you, Stan, towards Congress bailing out the airlines?
I'm not particularly. Yeah, I understand I understand conceptually what you're saying or alluding to, but I think the term bailout is not really. I guess it's an appropriate term, but the connotation is I'm not sure. I like that term.
You don't like that?
It's essential that you keep aviation industry going. You can't allow something like that to collapse. There's too much of the world economy, too much travel. There are too many things that are connected to it. So you have to keep it sustain. You have to sustain. So I would look at it more as a means by which to sustain a vital industry, more than I would look at it as a bailout.
Particularly through no fault of their own. I mean, you can't blame the airlines for 9/11.
Right.
Although maybe security-wise, and this is also another interesting question. Before 9/11, Captain Levy, the security systems was run screeners. You didn't have the TSA doing the security of our passengers being able to enter inside. For your, I guess, be able to go on your flight. And there was also mentioned that there was a lot of, I don't like to use the word lax, but people could also go with people that was traveling up until the ticket gates, I believe, before 9/11. That if a person was traveling, their family or friends could walk with them right up into their baggages, I believe, was about to go through the screening process. TSA had changed all of those aspects. Is that, first of all, Captain Levy, is that the case? Was the security system really a lot less stricter before 9/11, in your opinion?
That's a super good question, and this applies basically, Jonathan, to the whole world. The security, whether in Europe, where I flew a lot, Asia, and of course in the United States, security changed dramatically, literally overnight. After the attacks in New York, I happened to fly that night of 9/11 with the airline I was working with on a special flight. In fact, I was the last commercial airplane in the airspace United States, even after President Bush had just landed at Andrews Air Force Base on Air Force One. Now, the military kept flying the whole time for obvious reason. They call it CAP. And it was an air patrol throughout the United States. Still a mystery of what happened. Of course, we all learned rapidly what happened. But back to your question, your very good question. Security changed. We all matured. We learned the risks. We learned the traps rapidly through the intelligence services of the fine men and women all around the world, not only with the United States intelligence services, civil and military, but also in Europe and Asia. We learned very rapidly how this was pulled off, how also we were all unaware of these, and have been men, there's not any women, at least in the forefront of the hijackings, how they prepared themselves. And the big question was, how did this go undetected? That's all been changed. There's patterns I can't speak to that when certain patterns show up, and let me just say, put it that way, speak generally, that a red flag, a red light will come on, a red flag will be raised, and it's instantaneously looked into. That wasn't so before September 11th, 2001. It did starting that night and the next day, and that will never change. And as long as we have aviation, and it is becoming more sophisticated in some areas, they've learned how to detect threats in different ways so that we can get the passengers through the airports faster. People want to check their bags, check in for the flights, be checked through security, and get a refreshment, perhaps water or a sandwich, and get on the airplane. We know there's sometimes lines at airports, especially during holidays, that increases the travel time. But it's required, it must be done, and it will be done.
Well, Captain Levy, one area, the cockpit doors were not locked the way they are locked now. So obviously someone who would come on an airplane before 9/11 really could get inside the cockpit and be able to, I guess you can say, what happened in 9/11 as a takeover. There's been other security measures that I'm pretty sure has changed to go along with those areas. But when 9/11, but I guess before 9/11 had actually took place, did you see any warning signs now? I guess we're second guessing that was critical mistakes that led up to 9/11 in your expertise and opinion?
Jonathan, and please forgive me in advance for teasing you and Stan. I do have opinion on that, but I'm really sworn to secrecy to talk about methods or changes in terms of security with the entrance into the flight deck. Yes, I do have an opinion about that, but that would not be very smart of me to get involved with that and to announce that to the public.
Okay.
But please forgive me for that. And just, I would like to reassure your listeners, your viewers, that is, that government agencies around the world, not only U.S., but in Asia and in Europe, everywhere, Australia, New Zealand, are taking methods, and procedures are practiced by major airlines to keep the flight safe. Let me just speak that way. And my apologies for speaking in circles.
Okay, well, I mean, that's fair enough. I guess that is a controversial issue, Stan, and Captain Levy to ask.
Yeah.
It is.
Because, security is no accident. It's very, very strategic and well thought out. So there's some things you can't really talk about because for obvious reasons. So that's more than understandable. Yeah.
But you can, though. I mean, you would give your opinion. I mean, you can give your opinion.
Well, I would give my opinion, but I wouldn't be reckless with
Okay.
it.
All right.
No, because,
Well,
it's safe. That's
safe.
all I can, flying is the safest way to travel. You are safe on a plane.
No, but I mean some of the areas before 9/11 where you can see how the plane was taking over. I mean, I know you're looking at
right, but the
afterwards.
thing is that and I think this is something that people often miss when they may be having conversations about certain things. It's almost like sometimes what you leave out of an answer is an answer.
Is an answer.
So there's some things you really can't talk about. And so, you contrast one thing against the other, and by eliminating certain things, you can figure out what must have changed. So you can't really talk about it without being irresponsible.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, again, a lot has changed since 9/11, and a lot of things was different before 9/11. I mean, I think that would be a fair assessment over the overall aviation industry. Captain Levy, I don't want to put too much controversy, but I obviously used to hear reports about hijackings in the 70s. Maybe it was not as many as I'm alluding to, but I used to always hear reports of a plane being hijacked maybe once every 2 or 3 years going to Cuba. Was that really a problem though, Captain Levy, in the 70s of planes being hijacked?
Oh, it was. How about one that you two gentlemen, distinguished gentlemen, have not heard of? February of 1993. It was one of the old-fashioned hijackings. I was on the way from Munich, Germany, to Chicago O'Hare International Airport, and we were over the North Atlantic. And I was given training to qualifying that pilot to fly across the North Atlantic. And as I mentioned, I speak German, and I overheard one of the European airlines speaking German on a frequency that we use over water internationally, anywhere in the world. And it was a hijacking taking place. And it was a person with mental deranged person in the flight deck of this airline that's well known, one of the best in the world, a European airline, and the guy had a gun. Now, it turned out to be a fake gun, but they were taking no chances. The airplane had left Germany to fly to Africa, and this gentleman came out of the lavatory with a gun in his hand and wanted to, it sounds almost like a comedy show, but it was extremely serious, wanted to hijacked the airplane to New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, which he successfully did. Everybody landed safely. And so what happened, and I happened through a matter of coincidences, meet that captain. He became a close friend of mine for many years. He's passed away since. And he made a video for airline personnel only, about how he handled that hijacking there. But you're absolutely correct. In the 70s and 80s, the old-fashioned hijacking was take me to Cuba. Before the majority, now there were hijackings, and some were fatal. In the Middle East, in the 80s, there was a hijacking with another major airline. Not real pleasant. I don't want to go into that, how that turned out in Africa. It was a very fine European airline. I'm familiar with that. But all of those, the one I experienced and lived through in 1983, the Cuban hijackings, the one in the Middle East I'm thinking of where there was some deaths, the one in Africa I'm thinking of where there was one horrible death. Any death is bad. all are different from what we all lived through at September 11th of 2001. That changed the world.
But also the bombings too. I mean, I believe in 1988, Pan Am was bombed and blew up.
Yes. Good point.
I forgot the country that it was leaving.
Lockerbie. Was that Lockerbie?
It could sound like it could be
That's
Lockerbie. Yeah, you're right.
Lockerbie.
Scotland.
Yeah,
Was it
Scotland.
Scotland? Okay. So I mean, how would a bomb be able to get past detection if you are? I mean, what's the whole ins and outs? How somebody can actually plant the bomb in a plane and not be detected? I mean, what again? Some of the flaws that you thought led up to. If you can elaborate, I don't know if you can elaborate.
I'm gonna answer you this way and say that for your listeners, with this powerful internet that we all live with and will live with the rest of our lives with, you can go search the Pan Am air explosion in Lockerbie, Scotland. That's correct, what Stan said.
Mm-hmm.
And you can read what is available to the public. What has changed since then, since that very tragic accident, is monumental. And I can't get into that, and I apologize once again. I seem to be apologizing a lot, but security we can't take lightly. And let me just put it this way for the listeners and viewers: the world learned from that, from that regretful incident, and our thoughts and prayers go to not only the flight deck crew, the cabin crew, and the passengers involved with that tragedy. And anybody involved directly and indirectly. But the world, let me put it this way, the world learned from that. Just take that to heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The, as Captain Lee was saying earlier, you're always learning.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in aviation that happens. Best practices, policies, procedures are always changing, but in aviation, I might be a little bit, biased, but in aviation, it seems to be, it happens more. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time something goes wrong, it's noted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's marked, and there's a paper trail back to. So even if it's missed, it's noted,
mm-hmm.
and the changes are applied. There's airworthiness directives. I mean, it's when I was at Pratt & Whitney, I was in quality assembly quality assurance, and everything. I mean, down to the safety wire. I mean, it's this safety.
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about the submarines and General Dynamic, but I would say you'd have to go to that level to get more safer than you have in aviation.
You're absolutely right, and I'll tell you what I mentioned to Jonathan when we talked before on the telephone casually. I perform expert work for attorneys, and when there is an accident, a violation, people will get a scratch. And I'm being a little facetious, more than a scratch, of course. Something happens in the legal world, trust me, and I know you two gentlemen are aware of this, as are your viewers and listeners. Attorneys will examine every dot and every T. Everything, all the paperwork is pulled together and everything's examined to find out where this possibly could have been prevented and who's at fault here. And that's is argued in courts or in depositions and in hearings. Who was right, who was wrong, and it's a matter of law there. So we look at all the documents. So Stan nailed it. That's right. When something happens that makes the news or does not make the news, well, most often does not make the news, attorneys will get involved and will depose people and examine every bit of document and testimony from all the participants and find out where lies the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so there we can all learn from that also.
Yeah. Well, Captain Levy, I mean, obviously today, I mean, would you say we have more commercial airlines today than we had when you first got started it, or has there been less commercial airlines
That's a
today?
good question. As we're running short on time, I'll be very brief. That with deregulation that started when I started with a major airline, the deregulation started in 1878. The airlines bloomed. Bloomed, that means a number. And all around the world, they're still increasing. Now, COVID had a huge effect on that. But notwithstanding COVID, there are more. My guess is, and I've not done a tally on that, but there are more airlines out there now than there were pre 1978, is my guess.
Mhm. When you had major commercial airlines like Eastern and Pan Am, was that a big loss when those two airlines went
Yes,
out of business?
yes,
Okay.
yes. I knew people. I have friends in my military background and my civilian background with both airlines. Fine people.
Hmm.
Very regretful what happened. Yes, Braniff is another one. We all could look back in 2020 what mistakes they made, but we can't live life that way. We
Right,
all
right.
have skeletons, we have regrets, but what can we learn? How can we become more profitable and operate smarter, whether it's a commercial airline or as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a plumber, as a mechanic, as a flight attendant, and we get better and smarter and more efficient and more profitable as time goes on.
Right. Well, I'm trying to bring up the interesting, somewhat juicy questions, but I know you may not feel comfortable, I guess, giving answers to all of some of the questions. But some of your passengers feels like the airline tickets are a little bit, they charge you now for baggage fees. I mean, is the money design that the airlines charge you for justifiable? I mean, if the fuel cost is more expensive, then that has to be passed along to the airlines. But you hear reports that you have discounted airlines tickets, but then you end up paying in other areas. So does everything kind of balances off when you're buying a ticket? I mean, Stan, maybe you can answer that question as well. I mean,
I would be guessing.
guessing. Okay.
I have an opinion, but I don't know if it's right. So.
Okay. But I mean, traveling, I guess, Captain Levy, traveling has changed. I guess when you first got started in the aviation industry, traveling might have seemed like you was a celebrity. That you was really dressed up, first class. It was like a huge level of prestige to some degree. Today, it seems like everybody can travel. People travel casual. People travel frequently. Has that whole image of traveling changed, in your opinion, over the past 50 years also?
Well, that's absolutely true. Again, I'm older than you two gentlemen. And when I flew commercially as a very young boy, and when I was raised in Houston, Texas, by memory, my mother and father would have me and my brother and my sister put on fine, as we used to say, Sunday clothes. That is a coat and tie or bow tie, whatever. That is one respect. That's one aspect you're referring to. The dress has changed. People show up in flip-flops and shorts. But there's also, as you both are aware of, without us get into some areas that would not be popular, if somebody gets on with inappropriate wear, that's a no-go. Mm-hmm. That's something that's offensive to certain people. That won't float, and they will be refused. People refuse if they're drinking, and that is strictly enforced. That's a federal law right there. Another change is behavior on the airplane. Have fun, have a refreshment, bring your own refreshments on, but not alcohol.
Right.
Don't touch anybody. You touch anybody that's a stranger, that is, you're off the airplane. Mm-hmm. We will go back to the gate. That any type of physical contact is not is not acceptable. But those are the big changes, especially in the last few years. Society changes there. When the mask, and again, I'm not going to address right or wrong. You and I, all three of us could talk about that for days and years. But at one point, every major airline required the mask to be worn, and so some people will choose to. That's their right. to do that. That ended up with behavioral issues. Unacceptable. We may not like it, but at one point during the pandemic of COVID-19, masks were mandatory.
Right.
And except when you're taking medicine or drinking a fluid, eating a sandwich, it's common sense there. But everybody's got to be a lady and a gentleman and enjoy the flight, look at the view. If it's a stranger next to you, learn from them or take a nap and not talk with them. Read your book. Everybody has a right, but basically keep your rights to yourself. That's the rule there.
Captain Levy, technically, how fast can an airline really travel? Because at one point you had the Concorde jet, and I'm hearing talks about a supersonic plane that they're looking to implement possibly in the United States. But is there a maximum speed limit that an airline could actually be allowed to travel?
Yes. At this point, with the technology we have now, to keep it simple, the number is actually it's a German word, Mach, M-A-C-H. Mach 1.0 is the speed of sound. And the majority of commercial airliners flying now at Mach decimal 80, Mach decimal 78, Mach decimal 84, 85, 86, but that's not 1.0. That's there's a percentage of the speed of sound. There's zero doubt in my mind that with technology, it'll probably start in the corporate world first, in the smaller jets. They will be able to fly supersonic. And the issue is not the technology to fly supersonic. The issue is cost, the technology. And this is where the industry has learned from the Concorde. Sexy airplane, people made movies of it. Cost for the person where cost is no issue. Fly New York Kennedy Airport to London's Heathrow Airport in 3 hours, just under 3 hours. You climb up out of Kennedy, you level off and start the descent because you're in the 60,000 altitude range, and you're level maybe for a few minutes. It's time to start down, descend for landing. But it's the economics that got to the Concorde. Safe airplane, old technology, and it burns so much gas. 100%. I have 100% confidence that hopefully in our lifetime, we will see a commercial airliner flying over the water supersonic. Over the mainland of the US or Asia or Europe, the issue is still going to be the sonic boom, which affects livestock, people, homes, and that one has to be addressed. However, they can, with technology, fix or repair or improve the sonic boom. But over the water, the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, the world will become smaller. No doubt in my mind when that will happen. And I don't think it's that far down the road. I do not have personal knowledge of that, but I just want to tell you my gut feeling with technology.
Yeah, but Captain Levy, like you mentioned some type of mileage range, but I'm trying to find out, like, a commercial plane, like, can it travel 800 miles? Is it built to go past a certain speed limit? Like, you would hear the average speed of a plane was 500 to 600 miles on average, but is a plane technically can go up to, let's say, 800 miles, or that's not possible?
It's not possible with a footnote. And again, I don't want to get too technical. It's not that complicated, but the speed through the air is limited. And that is to give you we use knots, nautical miles per hour, as in the shipping industry. And maybe 480 knots. You're talking 510, 520 miles per hour through the air. Now, when you're flying from, let's just give an example of the United States, from Chicago or Atlanta or New York's John F. Kennedy Airport to Europe, and you're flying eastbound, normally 99% of the time or 90% of the time, you're flying with the wind. Your speed over the ground could be 800 miles per hour or 900 at times. Over the Pacific, here's an example. They have even stronger winds at times. I flew the Pacific often from Japan and China back to the United States. Over the North Pacific, that's just below the routes we flew, would be just below Russia, south of Siberia. We would have tailwinds of 210 10 knots, 250 knots. So that puts our speed over the ground at about 900 knots, but that's over the ground, not speed through the air. And you can guess going westbound into the wind, just the opposite. You slow down quite a bit.
Right. So the wind actually gives you more. If the wind is pushing you from behind, that's increasing your speed. But if you're flying into the wind, would that decrease your speed?
It does. The speed over the ground.
The ground.
Over the water, over the ground. But the speed through the air will not change. It has to do with the construction of the aircraft and the power of the engines, how fast the airplane can fly through the air. Now, when I flew from America to Hong Kong, for example, we flew at times, at our flying time could be 17 hours, between 15 and a half hours, 17 hours. And that we had enough fuel to fly that long range. Now, with that said, to make it, people don't want to make unnecessarily, unless safety requires a landing to get fuel. So we want to go fast, get them there, but not too fast where we burn excessive fuel where we have to make a landing. So the computers will help us figure that out. The flight dispatchers, the men and women who help plan the flight before we depart.
Stan, you have any questions? I mean, it's a real interesting conversation with Captain Levy.
I'm listening and enjoying the conversation. It's all This is great. It's a little science lesson as well. So this is great.
Well, Captain Levy, when a pilot is dumping fuel, is that another safety procedure? I mean, if you're flying over the air and you hear at times that the pilot is trying to burn off fuel, technically, can he drop fuel out of the plane to the ground through the air? I mean, how is that whole process when you hear when you hear the pilot is burning off fuel or dumping fuel?
The large aircraft I flew for the last 13 years before I retired at a major airline had the ability to, the verb we say, it doesn't sound real pretty, but dump fuel. We need to dump fuel. And if we have an emergency, we need to come back and land right away. Now, if it's a horrible emergency, we're on fire, we're not going to dump fuel. We're going to get a long runway and land the airplane overweight, and then maintenance as stands, where we'll have to conduct an inspection of the airplane for what we call an overweight landing. But with that said, if it's an emergency and we have time and the risk is lower by not landing overweight, we'll go to a certain altitude, generally 5,000 feet above the ground or higher, and we'll go into a designated area and we'll open up valves and we'll begin dumping fuel. And it vaporizes. It does not make it to the planet Earth at all, as long as we're above 5,000 feet. It vaporizes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, some other airplanes, also smaller aircraft, do not have fuel dumping capabilities, and they don't necessarily need it. They simply, if the emergency is that critical, they'll go and land overweight, and then the company has to pay for an expensive overweight inspection.
Captain Levy, have you ever been in a situation, you hear time to time, where the landing gear does not all come down? I guess you're talking about the tires of the airplane. So have you ever been in a situation where that has happened to you? And if not, when that happens, what is the method now that the pilot has to adjust to land the plane safely without the proper landing gear coming down?
My dear friend Jonathan, I've had it happen many times. Footnote, where? In the flight simulator, in training.
Oh, okay.
In the simulator. The real airplane, no, fortunately, the landing gear has come down every single time in 41 years. So thank you for that. But we do train for that, and it depends on the model of the airplane that we basically, open up some valves, and if you have to lower the landing gear manually, you open up a little bit doors, and you what we call crank the gear down. Put a crank in, and you unlock the landing gear, and it falls down. And some airplanes do not have a crank. It sounds old-fashioned. It's more the old-fashioned airplanes, older airplanes, but some of them still being produced today have the same mechanical method. Excuse me. Others, what you have to do if the landing gear will not come down is simply pull a mechanical latch or lever, and it unlocks the landing gear, and it falls down with gravity, and it will lock, and you have a safe situation. So you have many ways to get the landing gear out if it does not come out by its own. It's a pretty reliable system, and generally, most of the time, it is going to work. But once in a while, you'll see in the news where one of the three main landing gear, the nose gear, or one of the left or right main landing gear do not come out, and they have to go to alternate methods that we receive training on, or in my case, I give training on with colleagues, and they learn how to still extend the landing gear. And especially when we give them a problem in the simulator with hydraulic failure. The hydraulics have been depleted. It's a computer button I hit, a touch, press, and then they have to lower the landing gear with alternate means, and they do that successfully.
Well, Captain Levy, we're just about out of time. I just have one last quick question to ask you. What is the future outlook of the aviation industry, in your opinion? Do you see it changing dramatically, staying the same, or is it going to be some things that people may find surprising in the near future of overall aviation?
Great question, Jonathan. The aviation industry will be around. There's talk about in the industry about reducing the number of pilots with technology. I have my own thoughts about that, and we could address that some other time since we're running out of time. In the future of decreasing the amount of pilots on the airplane and still keep a safe operation. But with that said, the airline industry is here to stay, and I see technology improving. We're learning more methods to maintain safety, more ways and different ways to think, and what we call trap errors before they become consequential. One thing is guaranteed, and this is true, this is trite, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, or an airline pilot, change is 100% guaranteed. It is going to change. The way you know the airline industry today, what are we, August 22nd, 2022, September or August of 23, 24, 25, the airline industry is going to look differently. How? Let's stay tuned and watch with excitement. It'll be fantastic to watch.
Good answer, Captain Levy. Well, again, it was a pleasure, interesting, all rolled into one, having you on this morning to talk about the aviation industry. And again, Stan, unless you have any questions that you wanted to ask or comments to Captain Levy, we can pretty much end this segment.
No, I don't have any questions. All questions were answered. Very well done, and I'm sure it was very educational for many of our viewers. It's just a fascinating industry. It's a fascinating field. It's very, very broad, and anybody that would like to explore aviation as a line of work, something that you want to do as a vocation, is. I think it's one of the best places you could work. Next television.
The television. You in the television, but you used to be in the aviation.
I loved working at Pratt & Whitney. Just being around the technology and the test stands and it's just if you like technology and to see it working and evolving and being perfected. I mean, you can see improvements happening. It like almost daily, but most certainly month to month, you see things improving, getting better. It always is getting better. It's always getting better.
Always getting better.
Always getting better.
Well, that's a good way to really leave it off towards this segment. You always want to have improvements and things going better. And as Captain Levy just mentioned, the industry is going to look differently in the future. He even mentioned the very near future, which is like next year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't take long for things to really change. And hopefully that's a good positive sign that things are moving more in the right direction. Well, again, Captain Levy, it was a pleasure having you on. I have your contact information now, so I think you are expert in your field of work. And hopefully we can collaborate maybe in the future if something else comes along that I would like to discuss in the aviation industry.
Jonathan, that would be great. I know you're wrapping up, and Stan, you guys are wonderful guys, and I encourage all your listeners and viewers to tell your friends to tune in to your Access TV network show. It is fabulous. And yes, my last the comment for today is, as we say in German, auf Wiedersehen or au revoir in French. But if there is anything that happens in the aviation world and you want to talk about for 10 to 15 minutes, have your people contact my people and let's talk about it. So we can, and really we're doing a favor. We're explaining what's happened perhaps to relax people so they feel confident. At least they'll have an understanding and they can make a good value judgment on where they want to go with that information. Definitely.
That's a good, important answer that you, or information that you left off for this particular segment.
All right. Well, fabulous. Thank you, sir, for taking time out of your schedule, and look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you, Stan, and I love your picture about Daddy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, you guys have a great day, and all the best. Stay healthy and stay happy, Stan and Jonathan.
All right.
Bless you all. Bye-bye, guys.
You too.
Bye-bye.
God bless you.
All right.
All right. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Great information.
Aviation, yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Real important. And again, like I said, we haven't really discussed this industry. I think one time we had Captain Barry, this guy named Barry.
I remember.
Yes, I can't remember his last name, but Barry. He
lives in this area.
He does live in this area.
Yeah. I think he's based out of New York.
New York.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another cool thing. You know, as a pilot, you can live almost anywhere and still be based. In fact, my daughter is based. She lives in Atlanta, but she's based out of Detroit. Yeah. It's just
she spends a lot of time in Detroit.
No, just the way that, you know, availability of flights and seniority. It's complicated the way the nuance of it works, but it's just, I love it. What can I say? Okay. All right, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Morning talk, and we'll have conversation as we continue. Stick and stay. Tell a friend. Bring a friend along with you, and we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Nyesha Garcia. I am from Brazil. I help HPU. I help families de Universidade de Harvard Community. Estou muito feliz em participar. É muito importante o engajamento deles padres e madres nas escolas de Hartford com seus ninhos, my children. I love helping family e HPU. Thank you. Gracias. Obrigado.
So my name is Nelky Maldonado.
My name is Ramon L. Arroyo.
And we know that Hartford Parent University provides good services and resources to parents in our communities, which are greatly needed because a lot of times our parents, they don't know where to go, how to get information, and being part of this program is essential to them in being successful in their children's education.
And I think that parents should get involved in their kids' education because it's very important. Education is, I always believe, is a success in life. If you got a good education, you can be very successful.
So we encourage our parents to please come join the program, ask lots of questions, and I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed.
All right. Well, that's a past event. How about that, huh? We'll have to talk to the guys down in graphics. Yeah, drop that graphic, please. There we go. All right. That was a fun event, though. I'm going to show some highlights from the Jerk Fest, the West Indian Day Parade, we got a couple of different things that we've been covering lately, and we got to show some of the highlights. I gotta package them up for the morning show. All right, great guest.
Yes, he's an expert in aviation, and although some areas he didn't want to really talk about, I could still understand his reasons behind it. We had
can't talk about all. Everything's not appropriate for public dissemination.
Yes. And we did actually go over some things that he could and wouldn't be able to talk about. You notice we never mentioned the airline that he worked for. You can't.
Right, that would be inappropriate.
And the guest now was, Barry Alexander. That was the former. Well, he's not a former. That was a former guest that we had on a few years ago.
He's a captain on one of the major airlines. Yeah.
But the aviation industry is broad, Stan. I mean, I'm working at the airport. I guess you could say technically I'm in the aviation industry.
Yes,
but
yeah.
It's a real broad industry.
It is. It's a system. It's a system, and it's like a giant team,
right?
But everyone works together. From the minute the person gets out of their car or vehicle and puts their feet on the curb outside the airport, it's a system, and everything is done to make the passenger feel comfortable, so that they can reach their destination.
And I think, like you mentioned, it's something that affects the whole world economy. So even if Pratt and Whitney, let's say,
so we can see. There you go.
Yeah, even if Pratt and Whitney reduces its workforce, and I guess the aviation industry can reduce its workforce too, you can't eliminate it. You can't just totally downsize the aviation industry. I mean, you have to have a staff of people working. You have to have operations. Now, how they run the airlines, they could do it differently. I mean, they could have some airlines that fly more frequently than others, scheduling changes, how you build the airlines to hold more passengers or however. But you just can't, after 9/11 and even the pandemic a couple of years ago, because even the pandemic a couple of years ago, even though you didn't have any passengers on the planes were still flying. I don't know if they was flying their regular daily scheduling, but the plane was still going from point A to point B. But, the one thing he mentioned earlier that I kind of wanted to get into, he mentioned that there's a shortage in the pilot industry. But, Stan, as we talked maybe a few times in the past, you have a workforce shortage. And it's not just the skill level that's contributing to the problem, although that might be a big factor in some areas of some of your industries, that you just don't have enough skilled staff to meet the type of occupations. But if you talk to many different employers, they'll tell you that they're having a difficult time keeping up employees towards a staffing level. And, regardless, I think people will say the pandemic kind of contributed to this problem that we're having. And I don't know. I think on one hand, for a job seeker, it's a good problem, because you rather have more jobs and more jobs availabilities than the other way around. But how it affects, let's say, businesses, going forward, if they can't have enough staff people, they just can't function. I was looking at one segment, even the auto industry, that it affects you as the consumer because you want to get your car done in a timely manner. So if you go to a car dealership or a garage, and the first thing the dealership or the garage person will tell you is, well, it's going to take me at least a week before you could book your appointment. You may not want to deal with this. You would like to be able to get your appointments in, particularly if your car needs some type of service. And then for the people that own businesses, they're having issues, particularly auto garages, that they can't keep staff, people. And the segment kind of broke down some of the areas why. They brought up pay and compensation, the nature of the job. I was always under the assumption that most garages or dealerships, your mechanics, would get paid by the hour, but it's like a project or a flat rate, the amount of vehicles that they serve. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they make, but I'm just saying, it has really been, I tell you one thing, it's changed a lot since I graduated high school about the auto industry, and so I say the whole workforce industry.
Well, things have, as we talked about earlier, change is inevitable and change is always happening. Mm-hmm. And I think the change is something that individuals such as you and I see, because we have something to compare the change to.
Exactly.
10 years ago it wasn't like this. 15 years ago it wasn't like this. 5 years ago it wasn't like this. But to the 20-year-old who's entering into the workforce now, 5 years ago they were in high school. So to them, this is how it is. And 10 years forward, they will have had 10 years experience. And there will be a whole lot of folks too. So I think that, older people that are kind of insulated from what's going on, hear reports, and then they start seeing this change, and they're thunderstruck by it, because they're not witnessing the change as it goes along. But where we are as a nation, if you really dig a little bit deeper, you'll see that analysts have predicted that this is exactly where we would be. Mm-hmm. If not maybe right now, a couple years from now in the future. Mm-hmm. I think the pandemic pushed forward the change that was inevitable because of the shutdown. But these changes were coming.
Well, the thing you're hearing is that you're going to have a lot of retirees. Your baby boomers are entering the retiree segment. Even commercial pilots, they have to retire technically at 65, as he mentioned.
Yep, judges, a lot of people that are in commercial transportation, A lot of industries have forced retirement age.
But see, as I said, and I guess you mentioned, as older people, you can clearly see, and I think it's a good thing to have more opportunities and have more doors available that you have today. I mean, there's some things that would have been more beneficial in the past that really doesn't exist today. But overall, you have more outlets. You have more ways to generate revenue. You have more things that you can do. Technology has speeded up the process of how you function a lot more better, I think, today than it's ever been. Now, is it a solution to every particular problem? If you would say you have a workforce shortage and we have unemployment issues of people having a difficult time getting into the workforce, you would say that shouldn't be much of a problem today because you can almost pick your industry. I mean, if you want to get into the building trades industry, you want to get into the auto industry. He mentioned the aviation.
Excuse me. When you say people having a difficult time getting into the workforce, because this is an ongoing conversation that you and I have, people have to be prepared and trained. There's a certain level of responsibility on the person seeking the job to be job ready.
I understand that.
So, I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for people to work.
Well, I'm talking like a second chance. I'm talking about people that have, let's say barriers in the past. Like if you have a felony, you have other factors, you have more of a way now to overcome those things easier. I don't know if it's easy or not. I don't know if you have a felon, is it going to still be easy or not?
It may or may not be. It depends upon the person who's doing the hiring. Sometimes people don't want individuals who are who potentially pose to the employer's mind a risk. Because the society can say all that they want about giving people second chances. And oddly enough, a lot of the people who say this aren't hiring people.
Right.
So, they're not the one making the decision, nor are they employers who have had to lay people off or fire people who don't do the job right. So when you have a business and you're hiring people, let me rephrase that. When you have a business and you need to hire a person, you're going to hire who you think is the absolute best person for the job. And you've got 20 people to pick from. So you don't know who these people are. You don't know what they bring to the table until you start interviewing them. Some of them are going to be better than others. Some of them are going to have hurdles that they have to overcome. Now, unless you are somebody who had a second chance because of a mistake or something that is in your past, you may not be sympathetic to the person who does.
Right.
Then your sympathy for the person who needs a second chance, the second chance guy got a marked advantage over everyone else. So no matter how you work it out, there are going to be 19 disadvantaged individuals because only one of them can have the job.
Right.
And so in my thinking, anyone who's looking for a job needs to do all that they can to prepare themselves to be the best applicant out there. Because the world is very competitive. And as much as people would like to level the playing field or eliminate the opportunities for competition, that's really what that is. There's only going to be but so many people get the job. I'm sure there were a lot of people would like to be the quarterback of the Buccaneers, but there's only going to be one.
Right.
Maybe there might be a backup or two.
Right.
Tom Brady was a backup, but then he got his chance,
right,
and he held on to that chance, and he didn't let go. So how hungry is the person? Their need for a job, their need for work, their need for income is laudable, admirable, it's fabulous, but their need does not by any stretch of the imagination mean that it's automatically going to be there for them. They have to compete for it.
Well, there's no doubt about it, Stan. I'm not trying to, say you have to lower the standards. I'm just trying to outline that if you had issues even getting into unions, and I don't know if it's easier to get into a union today than it was in the past. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm not in that area of knowing what the union rules or what they're allowing to happen. I know you have to work with your employer. It's the old saying, you can't get the job unless you're in the union, and you can't be in the union unless you get the job. But there's some ways to work around that too, component.
Yeah, but I would say that for anything, it's let's start at everything you want to do is difficult. Well, if we start there, then then you just have to overcome those difficulties.
Well, say I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say a job is there's so many things that has happened along the time of history, and I know I'm going backwards, and I don't want to continue to do that. There are a lot of jobs that can be easy to obtain. The higher the pay, the better the job is. You're hearing reports that you would like to move the workforce to a 4-day work week. I think the average person would love to work 4 days at, I would say, 8 hours. If you could get away with it, I guess you still have to work a 40-hour work week.
Right.
But that extra day does make a difference.
In terms of what, having the day off?
Having the day off. I mean,
but see, Jonathan, I think part of our conversation is I'm speaking as an employer,
right,
and you're speaking as an employee.
Employee, right.
Employees don't set the tone or the amount of work. The only reason somebody gets a job is because the employer has work he or she cannot do themselves.
Right.
So they have to hire people.
I understand.
They're not a social service agency. They're not an employment agency. They just have work that needs to be done. And so they're willing to compensate the employee in exchange for their either expertise or their labor. And it's no more complicated than that. Now, the employee wants to make as much money for doing as little work as possible.
Right.
And I would like to have a 5-day week off. Work 2, be off 5 days. I mean, at what point? And all the only thing the worker is bringing to the game is their labor.
Yeah, but Stan, you actually hear business experts talking about a 4-day. It's not just the employee. You'll hear people from business organizations talking about it would be more cost effective to go to a 4-day work week. Your businesses is not burning utility costs. That's saving money.
Anytime a business decides to go to 4 week because they think it's better, then it's better for the business.
Right.
It's better for the business.
So that's why
it may or may not be better for the employee.
Mm-hmm.
Then how do you sell that? So all the narratives start coming along. The business is in business to make money or get work done.
Yeah.
That's it. If the employee costs too much, they will come up with another means. Automation, artificial intelligence, robots. If the assembly line's costing us too much because people have issues, they got all kind of problems, they can't come to work today, this, that, and the third, it becomes more lucrative and more profitable and more you can get better production from a machine. So if you could get a machine to do the work of a human being, the human being is gone.
Well, that's where even the country is going to be moving towards, because I'm hearing reports that many jobs are going to be eliminated over the next 10 years. You're going to have less need for people, particularly now if you got industries that is having a difficult time filling its workforce. That may not be the way a business would want to operate out of dire necessity to make a dramatic change. You would like it to come along.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Necessity dictates a lot of things.
A lot of things.
Business has a task: profit or get work done. Generally, the two go hand in hand. But sometimes it's not about the profit. Sometimes it's about the work. Like nonprofits, they're mission driven. So there's something they want to feed the hungry.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in it for the money. They're in it for providing the service. So if you have a nonprofit and you have 1,000 hungry people to feed in your city. You can't cook a food for 1,000 people. You can't go out and buy the food or acquire the food and plan the meals. Someone has to do the work. So you need volunteers or you need people who you can pay. You're only interested in meeting the demands set before you, those 1,000 people that need to be fed. Now, the workers need to be compensated, so now you got to raise the money so that you can compensate the workers. But this is about providing a service, not employing people.
Yeah, but you have to also be competitive as a business owner to realize if you're having a difficult time meeting its workforce, you have to now make your pay and your compensations more attractive.
That goes without saying.
That goes without saying. Okay,
but only to the degree that you can afford to pay them. You can't, or you go out of business, Jonathan.
Yeah,
you go out of business. A lot of companies go out of business. A lot of restaurants out there out of business right now.
Yeah.
So the need doesn't mean by default that it's just automatically there. If you can't afford to pay your employees, then you can't get the work done. And if you can't get the work done, you will go out of business.
Well, that's your whole purpose, that you have to be careful when people are telling you to start a business. Doesn't make any fiscal sense for you to start a business. If you don't even have a need to hire people or build a company, pay taxes for something that really you don't need to go into business. Going into businesses is not designed for everybody. Everybody is not going to make a profit. Most businesses, they will say, fail within the first 5 years. If you want to help people and still make a profit, that's a good, noble effort. If you can do the two.
If you define helping people if helping people is defined as employing them, because there's other ways to help people.
There's other ways to help people. If you want to provide a service to the community, let's say you got a need in the community that's non-existent, so you want to be able to provide something that the community doesn't have, and at the same time you want to generate a profit out of providing a service. So let's say that you have a community or a neighborhood that has a lack of a viable large grocery store. You want to provide healthy food for people. You want to provide food for people in the community. You also want to be able to make a profit. Obviously, that's the bottom line, is for you to make a profit. The best way to make a profit is to have a services that people need. And at the same time, if you can employ people and give people some sense of getting into the labor market in the community where your business is located at, it's like it's a whole mutual.
It's a mutually beneficial relationship between the person who is in business and those who wind up working.
Right.
But this whole notion that because people need food, we have to put a grade A organic supermarket. Well, maybe it needs to be a nonprofit entity.
You mean a nonprofit running a grocery store?
No, a nonprofit food distribution center that distributes wholesome, good food. They're not interested. They're not profit driven.
Yeah.
A profit driven entity such as that might not want to come to a place. There's nothing in it for them. They're not in the business of losing money. That businesses can't function if they don't make money.
But you just kind of answered a new question then. If our businesses can't open up a business to lose money and there's still a need for the community, then a nonprofit would be the ideal solution. I never thought about that.
A nonprofit would be a potential solution because the profit supermarket isn't coming. They're not coming.
Right.
You can incentivize them to open a building, remodel, this, that, and the third, but the minute they don't make a profit, they're out, or they're going to close their door. This is not rocket science. It's like pumping a well. As long as there's water, you can pump well. You can draw water out of the well until it goes dry. Once it goes dry, you can't get any more water out of it. So, well, you know what? We'll incentivize your well by giving you a 100,000 gallons. So we're going to start you off. Well, when the 100,000 gallons goes out, there's nothing left to draw. If people don't shop at your store, if it costs more for the products than you bring through the door, you can't buy stuff at a loss. Government can do that.
Well, you notice, Stan, when you have a community or a city and you see like a factory being built or a factory is there, let's say a factory that has 9,000 employees.
Like a Pratt & Whitney?
A Pratt & Whitney.
Or General Dynamics?
Well, even a smaller version. Let's say even a smaller company with 200 or 300 people. But then when you start to see construction, let's say you have a community area and you start to see a lot of homes being built in that area and people are moving into the homes, the next thing you're going to start to see is businesses that people need.
That's a thriving community.
And I'm saying that, so it's like a domino effect. You build the homes or you have people move into an area, other businesses start to follow. I guess in the case you are talking about, for some community, they just can't support certain businesses.
They can't, but Jonathan, what you're talking about is a thriving community that is growing in an organic way. The factory comes to town or the warehouse comes to town, all right? Let's take out west. The President of the United States shut down what was a booming industry with the pipeline. Irrespective of the politics, the environmental, this, that, and the third, they were getting oil out of the ground, whether by fracking, by drilling, by sideways drilling, this, that, and the third, pumping water, all that, yeah. But they couldn't hire people fast enough. So people were moving out there to provide goods and services. They needed people who were engineers. They needed people who were going to be laborers to pick up the pipe and to do all this kind of stuff. And so the more people that come, the more you need services for them. Dry cleaning, entertainment, stores, supermarkets, because the people are hungry. Well, these people can't just be out there living in a tent. You start building houses and it starts growing. He stopped it. The reverse happened. There's no more work because there's no more demand. System collapsed. People start selling off their homes if they can. Some take deep losses because there's no one to buy the home now. All right. So if you have a community, like say North End of Hartford, where a lot of the people there are on public assistance, there's very little disposable income.
Right.
Folk aren't going out there paying, $15 a pound for salmon.
Right.
They're getting canned salmon or frozen salmon at Stop and Shop. So if you put an organic Whole Foods type supermarket in the middle of the North End and salmon's costing $15 a pound, who's going to go there and buy it?
Yeah, well, see, when I'm talking about healthy food, and obviously organic is a form of a healthy food.
It's going to cost more money, Jonathan. It's going to cost more money. So who's going to buy it?
Well, Stan, right now, everything is costing more money all across the board with inflation.
But that has nothing to do with it. That makes it even worse. If there was no inflation, before there was inflation, there was a need for an organic, great food place like Whole Foods. We just cut to the chase. Whole Foods will be our example in the North End. They've been trying to get something like that because the North End is a food desert.
Yeah.
Right? So the need for it doesn't mean it should automatically be there, because who's going to pay for it? How's the store going to stay open? If Whole Foods could make money with a supermarket in the North End, Whole Foods would be there, their competitor would be there, and their competitor's competitor would be there.
Yeah.
Because there's money to be made. Companies that are driven by profit go where profit can be made. If they're not there, there's no way for them to make money.
Well, I'm not saying it's necessary, but it could be necessary, because I'm not in the inside with Howard Hill and what he's working towards. But I think if it's like it's a chess match, Howard Hill may be advocating one thing for the community, in the area where he has his business and his need towards. You are coming now to Howard Hill saying, look, it's just not, you don't want to come out and tell the man it's not durable. It's not going to work.
I'm not in a position to tell him that his dream isn't doable. I don't know the full extent of what he wants to do.
That's why I don't want to really elaborate. But let's just say for the sake, I would assume there used to be a grocery store in Unity Plaza. So most likely you would want to have a grocery store back there.
So how many attempts at opening a grocery store in Unity Plaza have there been?
It's been several.
Have they been successful?
Not of recent.
Why?
It's a key. People just don't have the money. They're not supporting it.
Has anything changed to make a supermarket there successful?
No, it hasn't. But again, Howard Hill is the one that will be putting up the money. See, it's one thing.
And Donald Trump could put up the money. Warren Buffett could put up the money. Putting up the money for the store doesn't change the community's income. It's not about putting up money. It's about who's going to sustain it.
Well, again, I don't know everything. I don't know anything directly other than what I hear about Howard Hill.
Well, we don't need to bring Howard Hill in. This is not about Howard Hill. This is about the sustainability of a community. This is about the economic capacity of a community to sustain the type of stores that you're talking about. People talk like the need for it somehow makes it material.
Well, no, I just brought up a store as an example when we was talking earlier about certain. You was making the example as the business owner. I was making the example as the employee. So I said a common denominator would be if you had, let's say, a business, you had homes, and then you had people. I threw in the fact that a grocery store as one example. There's other things that people need beyond just a grocery store. You know, I personally buy health products. The health products that I have to buy, I have to go out to Manchester to buy. I can't sit around and hope that a vitamin shop health store opens up somewhere in the northeast section.
That's not going to happen.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I'm being realistic, Stan. But again, you know, is it convenient for me who has a car to go 15 miles or 15 minutes? Yeah, it's not that big a deal for me. Everything plays a factor. You need to have money. You need to know what you need to buy. You need to have the means to get what you're looking to buy. Would I support a vitamin shop? Now, I know you can do things online and buy things like that as well. So even if you don't have a particular service in your community to support the community and to support what you need, I guess you can purchase something online. I like to be able to walk into the store, see what I'm going to buy, talk to the owner of the store if I have questions about the product. So that gives me more of a better feeling. Once I'm accustomed to buying the product after a period of time, then I could still now I can purchase the product online because I know what I'm getting. So I'm not saying everything is not just about just a grocery store. It could be many.
That was just an example.
That's what I was saying.
It would be no different if you're talking about the vitamin store or a tire repair shop. It doesn't matter what the entity is. The point is there the economic capacity of the community to support this desired entity?
The point that the community, me as an individual and anybody else, is you got to get income in your account to function.
That and I believe that responsibility is on the person who needs the income.
I don't have any disagreement. I was just talking about the worker shortage issue. I was just using the word. I said, and I still stand by this, that it is more opportunities with the workforce. If there's a workforce structure and you don't have enough jobs to meet the people, then it's going to be more difficult for you to obtain a job. Or if you want to create a business. I don't know. Everybody has their different individual choices. But just as the workforce as an example, now how much money you want to make, of course, as the employee, you need to figure out what is the best amount that you can make for the type of job that you're looking for. Nobody should walk into the labor market blinded and ignorant. Some things you will have to learn, on the job and learn throughout the business, but you should have a good understanding and a good idea. the job pays this amount per hour. This is what I'm going to make per week. This is what it's going to cost me to get to the job, how much I'm going to burn up in fuel costs. So everything you have to put into your budget. After a period of time, does it make sense for you to stick with this job? Are you getting better? Is it fitting all of your needs? Some people will say today with inflation, you have to make more money than you did 2 years ago because things have just gone up tremendously. What it costs, like I mentioned last week, you go to a grocery store 2 years ago or last year, something cost $40. Now it's $80. Am I making enough money to keep up with this every single week?
Well, I guess for me, Jonathan, this ongoing conversation is to what end?
Well, promote something about opportunity. I think I mentioned to you something even this past week. What was it? What link did I send to you this past week about the friend, the co-worker at the airport is switching occupations. He's going into the lawn care business. So I think I sent you a link of a lawn care business, particularly for young people who have that energy and, physical stamina that might be a good fit for younger people. The whole notion that you're constantly hearing in nauseum that we keep telling people that they have to go to college. You don't have to go to college to have a viable career today, I think, than you did more in the past. Is it a guarantee that if you go into the guy that I know, the co-worker, he's going to be making more money working in the lawn care business than what he was making? So to him, that sounds like it's a good fit.
He sounds like he wants to make more money.
He wants to make more money. So I'm just saying that's just another job that they need people. I'm just saying. So
well, they need people in all kinds of jobs. So I mean, I still don't understand.
Is the message getting the people that need jobs? I guess that's the question I'm trying.
So
to,
I'm like, yeah. Where's the question in this that can be answered?
Well, is the message and information the people out there in the community that is still unemployed or underemployed? Is they're getting the message, or they're buying into it that you can be able to get into the workforce and you would be somewhat better off working as a productive citizen if you have more choices to fit your interests, which is something that I would like, that I like personally. I like to now have more choices.
Well, I think that's great, Jonathan.
I'm saying that. There's not a problem then, in your opinion, with the information reaching people.
No, because people know that they need a job.
No, but I mean, they know where the jobs are. They know who's hiring.
Jonathan, it's the responsibility of grown people.
Yeah.
Young people.
Well,
know that they want a job, so they go they go to McDonald's, they go to workforce development, they look for ways to make money.
So then that means there's no problem. Then
I don't see how there can possibly be a problem. I use food as an example all the time.
Yeah.
Do people know that they could go to different places and eat?
Right.
I can't speak to that. I know they need to eat.
Right.
So some people may eat at the same place all the time and never go to another restaurant. Why don't you go to another restaurant? I don't know. I mean, these are personal decisions people make. Everyone knows they need income so that they can purchase stuff. The folk that don't understand those things are citizens and our neighbors who we need to take care of.
Well, again, it's not about whether people know they need income and they need to make income. The only thing I was trying to address towards is, do everybody know where certain business? Because sometimes somebody told me about the airport, I was not even thinking about the airport. So sometimes you might have a business that you just may not know of, and somebody can tell you as a networking source, this company is hiring, you can make this amount.
I think these are things that people discover along the way. I was 19 years old when I walked into Pratt & Whitney.
Right.
I went in there to be an inspector. I was working on the F-100 engine line on the main assembly floor in East Hartford. And it was then that I discovered at 19 that there were people there who just replaced the light bulbs. There were people there that replaced the blocks that were in the floor. There were machinists there. There were accountants there. There was a medical division. There were people there that cooked food. There was all kinds of jobs. And it never even occurred to me that there are people who do all kinds of things. I think these are the types of things that people discover along the way, as their interests are expanded and they get a bigger view of the world. You can't expect everyone to know everything. How are they going to learn? How are they going to find this out? Is there going to be a big book that just has hundreds of jobs? You could go to the want ads and see all of these jobs.
That's true.
There's a certain amount of responsibility on the person seeking information to find it.
But
and I think that burden is placed on the individual seeking more than it is on the folk to deliver it. I think that on everything, people say, well, government needs to do a better job of reaching out. No, you need to do a better job of finding out what's available.
Well, let's connect the dots with your starting point. Wouldn't you say your father, who you mentioned many times, at least to me many times, I am aware of, was in the aviation industry, so that played a role in giving you somewhat of an introduction?
That played a direct role. And that's what I was introduced to. I wasn't introduced to computer engineering or science or anything else. My dad was a mechanic, worked for an airline. He became the director of maintenance. I didn't want to be a doctor, that's for sure. That's what my mom was. So I gravitated toward aviation.
Right.
There's thousands of things I could have gravitated to, but that's what I knew. Most people are like that.
Right. That's human nature.
Right. Because you know what you're exposed to, and the things that you're familiar with are the things that you move toward. And then you discover other things.
Yeah, but then you will hear certain community leaders or whoever that they classify themselves as that we have to broaden the horizons of people. You know, is one reason why many times in the past, I don't know if they still have it today, you had Camp Current. So you would take children from the inner cities, bring them out to the rural setting, show them different areas of life that they would see non-existence where they grow up at. So during the summertime, you know, you had Camp Current taking kids who don't have parents, who have money to take them for vacations. Whether you feel that's valuable or not.
The valuable or not is an irrelevant point. They take 200 kids out of the Camp Current. This is not a broad section of society, Jonathan.
Okay.
You know, there's nothing wrong with giving kids an opportunity to see other things.
Right.
I think that happens at youth groups, at churches, all across the country, not just in the inner city. And in you know, there's always a means and a ways to expose people to new things.
Right.
That's because people are concerned about them or they themselves are concerned. But that is not the mission, the broad mission or responsibility of the society at large to make sure that everybody knows everything there is to know so that they can make a choice. I fundamentally don't accept that.
And then I get the feeling that you don't even believe that broaden your horizon. Because I brought this up the past couple of weeks, that people who have a broadened horizons, they don't make better choices. Maybe that's not the exact way I brought it up a couple of weeks ago.
I think people that have broad horizons they have more opportunity to make choices because they are aware of more choices. You're always going to have people who are in a position to choose from a broader plate, a broader menu. Some people's menu is narrow. Others can choose from anything.
Right. Well, vision is real important.
But that is that's a uniquely individual thing, not my vision imposed on you, but your vision exploring the things and the avenues that you would like to move toward. And people have things that are interesting to them. People move toward their interests until they find out other things. And wow, if they'd have known that 20 years ago, they would be in a whole nother field now. But they didn't. They could start another field right now.
Right, I understand.
But they didn't know 20 years ago. And if they were exposed, yes. But we don't live 20 years ago. we live now.
So, but the 20 years now, you can start with who's at the plate today. So, if people call themselves concerned people, and you see young people graduating high school, you want to set a type of outlook for them to aim for.
So who are these concerned people?
That's what I'm trying to find out. I mean, it could be, well, see, the concerned people could be me. It don't have to be that you.
So are you concerned enough to go up to the high school and talk to the young people when they come out of school about the possibilities? I mean, we have these kinds of conversations, not just you, but a whole lot of other folk in the community about what the young people need. But then who is the we that does all the work that the folk talk about?
Well, see, I don't even buy into. I just said young people, but I think everybody has a need. Young people have different needs than older people. If you're in high school, you have a different need because you're not an adult. You're not legally responsible to be on your own. Mm-hmm. Although things could happen or you could be forced out and have to be on your own, but legally you have some sense of protection from society. You don't like to say society has to handicap people and help people in every category of their life. I think you do feel everybody can play a role in some areas, but you don't want to let well, I guess you're trying to put the emphasis is everything starts with the individual, like Michael Jackson and the man in the mirror theory. You got to look at yourself first.
The person that bears the largest responsibility for your success is yourself. Mm-hmm. I think people are done. I think there's great harm and detriment when people are told that someone else is the biggest contributor to their success or failure. Mm-hmm. Because then that causes them in time to think, well, I can do nothing on my own. Someone needs to do it for me. Mm-hmm. Then I'll be successful. Now, there are people who adapt to that, and they wind up being wherever someone left them. Mm-hmm. The capacity for change, that burden is on the individual. And I think people do much better when they are allowed to, when they're given the tools to follow their dreams.
Well, that was the whole key, really, what you just said about the tools. I just thought information is part of the tool. That don't assume that everybody knows everything. Now, I understand what you're saying. You learn.
They don't know everything. They learn as the opportunities present themselves.
Now, but if you learn the hard way sometime, you get involved in the criminal justice system, you know it's going to be a tremendous barrier because you're going to get a record. It's going to be difficult for you to do many different things. Mm-hmm. So if you confront someone before they get into the criminal justice system, now, obviously, Stan, I understand everybody should know right from wrong. You know, if you break the law, you got a chance of getting arrested. You got to go to court.
Right.
Now you have a record.
I would dare to say that most people are gotten to before they get into the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. I think what you're alluding to is finding a way to go back in time and get the people who are in the criminal justice system. If someone would have gotten to them before, they may not be there now. But most people don't wind up in jail. Mm-hmm. Most people are gotten to and never get into the criminal justice system. I think we forget that most people aren't in jail. We talk like jail is the natural, byproduct of the existence. Mm-hmm. And then everyone's going to wind up in jail if they don't. No, that's just not the truth.
Well, I wouldn't say most people are in the criminal justice system. I think the numbers do speak for themselves. I think there's enough people in the criminal justice system that it has an impact on families and society. I'm not saying that makes up the whole society neither, but I wouldn't underestimate the amount of people that's in the criminal justice system towards the impact that it has on society.
So do you see any positivity or light anywhere?
Well, people like Reverend Henry Price is working on, there's people who specializes in those areas of reentry system. You got to be real. You got to know what you're talking about, what you're doing. Me giving an opinion is not like Reverend Henry Price, who works directly with people in the criminal justice system.
Right, but he's helping people come out of the system to go on the straight and narrow and find a means to live. That's what he does. He has a lot of experience in that area.
He has experience on both sides.
Exactly. So he can give people and speak to them in ways that they understand. Now, you're not talking about people in the criminal justice system. You're talking about preventing people from getting there. And so I think that in order to, let me rephrase this. One has to see opportunity in order to grasp it. If one sees no opportunity, then there's nothing there for them to grasp.
Right.
If all they see is gloom and doom and no opportunity and no work and no way and no information, what is there to motivate them to grab at opportunity?
Well, let's put it now towards the puzzle then. Don't just take my opinion, take your own opinion. If you was to get up every single day, Stan, and you went to Unity Plaza and you stood there for 4 or 5 hours a day, I don't think you're going to see much opportunity. You might can see something every now and then, but overall, you're not going to see much opportunity there.
Right.
Now, if that's the best that you can go to, if that's the means where you're at, and that's where you're limited towards, don't expect much of an outlook change, because nobody, like Reverend Brown has said, nobody on a white horse is going to come down and rescue you.
There's 2 ways to process that. If I go to a place, because I like to make it, push it to a need, and no one needs anything like they need food. Now, if I go to Unity Plaza and I stand there on a Sunday and I'm hungry, and there's nothing open, I shouldn't expect to eat.
All right.
So what do? Stay there? Or maybe I look elsewhere for opportunity. If you keep going to Unity Plaza, no, there aren't very many opportunities. But you keep going back there.
Yeah.
Year after year after year. The logical course of action would be to look somewhere else.
All right.
Maybe you look downtown.
All right.
Maybe you look at East Hartford. Maybe you go to Detroit. Maybe you go to Philadelphia. You have to go where opportunity is. If you don't go to where opportunity is, you will never be able to take advantage of opportunity.
Well, that's the roadmap now. So again, it all falls on the individual. The individual is responsible for getting away from Unity Plaza and getting to where he needs to be at to fit whatever he needs. It's not even for Howard Hill, although Howard Hill can play a role because he's concerned with Unity Plaza. He has a business very close, if not in Unity Plaza, but basically right down the street.
Well, I can't speak for Howard Hill.
But you just answered the own question, though. You're going to get the same thing if you go to Unity Plaza. That's just what I asked you. If you go to Unity Plaza for 4 to 5 hours a day and you spend every day there, that's what you're gonna. That's what you're gonna.
Right. There's enough non-forward move at Unity Plaza to cause the average person to think this place is not prospering.
Right.
That closed, and that closed, and that guy's talking about closing. Maybe I should go somewhere else. So you do.
You, as the same person with knowledge, you wouldn't even spend more time than you have to be, unless you have to go to Unity Plaza for whatever reason. So you, as the person who has your head screwed on, know this is not going to get me anywhere, will leave Unity Plaza within 4 to 5 minutes. The person that is, whatever his deficiency is, who is in a situation where either he's here or he's back in a basement with nothing to do until the end of the day. Can he go downtown? Yes, physically there should be nothing. If you can even you can walk from Unity Plaza to downtown. So there's really nothing that would stop him from going downtown if he wants to see something differently?
That person needs someone to intervene in their life and inspire them.
Right.
That will more than likely happen from someone in the community that cares about young people or other folks' well-being, or a family member. Now, there are going to be people in society who are going to fall through the cracks. They don't have the capacity, whatever the case is. So those individuals become dependent on society, and it is our burden and our responsibility to help individuals in that state. That's why we have the systems that we do. Everyone is not going to be able to make it, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So we help them. We're not talking about the people that can't make it. We're talking about the ones that have the capacity to make it. And we're not going to give them an excuse for being where they are perpetually, because they can do better. If someone motivates them and they understand that the bar is not going to be set here for you to remain here.
Right.
They need an inspirational speech like a coach does for an athlete that thinks he doesn't have what it takes. People need inspiration, and that takes a different type of approach. But just to make them aware of opportunity downtown doesn't mean that they're going to. It still requires them to make that decision.
Well, I can relate to that because for a long time, Cliff Thornton, when I was part of Efficacy, was telling me certain things that I needed, and I was letting it go through one ear, through the other ear, and I could give him a good reason why, but at the end of the day, it wasn't changing my circumstances. So I can relate to what, because Cliff Thornton even said one time that if you keying information constantly decided that you wasn't ready to change, then what do you expect from people who are not even hearing? Cliff was on me consistently. You know, I mean, I was somewhat part of his organization, Efficacy, but he was on me consistently saying, you can't get from point A to point Z. You got to go from point A to point B. And I was just finding excuses to tell Cliff why I can't do this, why I can't do that. And at some point, he just got tired and said, look, you know, maybe somebody else needs to talk to you because I'm not reaching you.
You think?
Okay, so I'm saying, but if you have people, and again, you said a motivating factor, inspiration, whatever the case may be, if you become a bum stand up, I mean, to put it bluntly, bums can change. One thing people can change given the right circ. So just because somebody hits rock bottom and they're falling through I've seen too many people, even of recently, who was caught up in something totally different, who got their life turned around. So I know it can change. Sometimes what people are saying, like Cliff Thornton, is, are we just replacing people from one generation to the other? So, okay, you get rid of a group of people who used to hang at Unity Plaza. They're older, they moved on for whatever. And then a new crop of people just start hanging there. Is the place just set up now for people just to hang out and lauder and do unethical things throughout the day?
You know what? People that are going to do those things are going to do those things.
Anywhere.
That's who these people are. That's what they decide. Just like folk go and play tennis, some folk hang out. Some folk hang out and get high. Some folk like to hang out, tell stories while they get high with their friends. They got to meet somewhere. If that becomes the place where everyone meets, then that's where they meet.
Right. But but I'll tell you one thing: if you clean up a place and put some strict rules, you're not gonna just lauder and hang out there.
You won't hang out there to go somewhere else. Go
someplace else.
So people are free to do what they want. Society determines whether or not you're hanging out, smoking blunts, getting high in the park is bad, relative to hanging out at the country club, getting stumbling drunk, drinking martinis.
Right.
So you know, which is worse? It's society makes that decision. But people like to gather together with people who have similar ideas and like minds. And they may all get drunk together at a country club and slap women on the rear end and carry on in misogynist, evil ways. And somehow that's okay. But if they're in the park not bothering anybody, smoking, getting high, oh, they're criminals. So these are societal issues. But people get together with like-minded folk. You have the right to assemble still in this country. And you can do what you want as long as you're not bothering nobody.
Right.
And it seems like Unity Plaza is where folk is hanging.
Yeah.
They're not causing anybody any trouble.
They're not of late, and I know the history of
Right, and with what little money they have, they find whatever means they can to escape, and they live their best life. Everyone doesn't have to conform to these quote unquote standards that someone arbitrarily sets up. And you know, we generally think of bums in a condescending way, but sometimes people like not having any restrictions, no obligations, no responsibility, and they're willing to pay the price for that kind of a lifestyle. That's not criminal. If people have opportunity to access, if people are not cut off from the opportunities to access things, that's the best people could ask for. If you go to other countries where poverty reigns supreme, and I mean, you know, the wealth is in the hands of very, very few, where there's very little government structure. If you're poor, then you're in a bad situation generally for the rest of your life.
Right.
In this country, most people are blessed to be able to have opportunities to do almost anything they want. We have people who come into this country from other countries under the worst conditions and prosper. We have people who are right now in Unity Plaza who 2 years from now will have their lives totally turned around because they made the decision to do so. There are people from every bad part of the country in this country who have succeeded. There's people who've gone to the worst schools and have succeeded. So the possibilities are there, Jonathan.
Yeah, but gauge places like Unity Plaza. When you make that statement that within 2 years, sometimes people have to gauge the people that you're talking about and see from 2 years.
I don't know who that person is, but someone 2 years from now is going to be doing very well who is not doing well now. Just the law of probability and the nature of human beings.
Right. Well, same thing you almost say with the pandemic. 2 years ago, the country was completely shut down. Even though they was giving out the stimulus checks and they gave an increase in employment, but people would say the economy is booming now. Although I'm hearing talks about a recession, certainly inflation is a big factor. But again, I mean, to every individual, you can't, you know, every individual has to be gauged differently than the next person. So, you know, I'm not going to disagree with what you just said, that there could be someone at Unity Plaza or some other disenfranchised area that within 2 years is doing better. There's been such times when I didn't have any money, I didn't have my car fixed, and within months, I think the longest I've ever been without a vehicle is 8 months. And that got changed. Although, you know, you got other issues that you're dealing with. So until everything gets kind of back where I personally feel, for me, I'm not speaking for the community, then I'm not going to rest on my laurels. But certainly I like overall where the country is at, certainly compared to the pandemic 2 years ago when everything was just shut down. You couldn't go into businesses. You couldn't do nothing.
Arbitrarily shut down and unnecessary, as it is turning out that it was. As I was saying, I'm so glad I'm on record as having said all that stuff. Day after day, post after post. Now they're coming out with the fact that they made a mistake. When you arbitrarily shut down a mom and pop store, but you leave a Walmart open. You know, all of this is just, it's the absurdity of all the damage that was done to the response to COVID. Not COVID.
Yeah.
The response to COVID, which is unseemly. People should go to jail for what they did.
Well, let me ask you another question. I mean, I heard back from Bob Stefanowski, believe it or not, a few days ago.
Oh, okay.
He's not making no guarantees, but he said someone would be contacting me from his staff. But let's say the governor's election, Brandon McGee, who used to be a former state representative for the Hartford, Windsor, Bloomfield area. I think it was what district. He was a state rep before he had to step down. He has a key position with the Lamont, not the administration, but with his campaign, election staff. Are you interacting with him? Do you know anything beyond what you said? He had contacted you a few weeks ago with the media lunch that you had with Governor Lamont. Do you kind of know what his role is as a political?
I believe
director?
he's the political director.
Yeah, but what does that really mean beyond? That's what I'm trying to find out.
I can't speak to that. You'd have to ask him. I don't know what his role and responsibility is.
Well, I guess right now it's working with the re-election to get him re-elected. He's not part of the administration, although he stands very good chance of being part of his administration.
He's not part of the administration because it's in the political side of this is the politics. They're trying to get him reelected. I would imagine after the election is over, should the governor get reelected, he would become part of the administration.
Well, he was a state rep. He ran for mayor of Hartford. I don't know, man. I don't really know too much about him. I mean, I send him some messages, like I sent a few people on Facebook. I've met him a few times. He put together a couple public forums that I had attended.
Yeah, Brandon is quite capable.
Capable of what?
Of whatever the task is. I mean, he's a very capable human being and sharp and is.
I think what I'm really trying to allude to is if let's say Lamont gets reelected, would he be like the link to the community? I don't know what position he would be.
I can't speak to that. Okay. I have no idea.
Is it needed then? Do we need a linkage from people through state government to the communities of the urban centers?
I would say we have a system in place that does that already. It's called your state representative.
Okay.
Or your town councilman. And people don't use them.
Right.
So rather than to reinvent the wheel or make a whole nother avenue, let's try using the ones we have. People don't use the resources available to them.
So you don't,
in my opinion.
So we don't really need another new urban task force or another urban policy. We don't really need that. We already have those.
What about the ones we have that we don't use?
That's what I'm trying to find out. We already have that to do that.
Right. What we lack is the will to get something done.
Right.
And so until the will to get it done is exercised to execute, nothing happens.
All right. Well, that's what I was wondering, maybe if, people you always hear every now and then, we need an urban policy, we need an urban agenda, we need an urban initiative. Truthfully, the Lamont is going to win the urban cities. I don't think
there's a concern of the governor winning the urban vote. I think the concern is how much of that vote. It is clear that the Republican candidate will not win the city.
Right.
But the Republican candidate has a potential to take a larger slice of pie than normal.
Okay.
And I think that's what maybe has some people concerned. And if he can take a larger slice of pie than normal, then perhaps some folk won't even be concerned enough to get out to vote. And that's a problem.
Well, the whole question people would say is, what impact is it going to be on your daily life if Governor Lamont, gets reelected or Bob Stefanowski gets elected? I think there has been some things maybe this year that Governor Lamont has spearheaded and pushed What it's directly reached every individual, I don't know about all of that. But when you have a campaign, a lot of money starts to pop out of places now that it didn't pop out of in the past. And I could show you, okay, this is what y'all have in New Haven. This is what you have in Hartford and Bridgeport. This is why, we need to keep the Lamont administration going for the next 4 years. That's what a governor campaign slogan will now start to advocate.
Well, this is the power of incumbency. As the incumbent, you can do these things.
Right. I'm going to say for me personally, and like I say, hopefully I will be able to have Bob Stefanowski as a guest. I would feel more complete talking to him. Even though he had responded back to me, the fact that he still has not said, he actually said he's not saying yes, that he's going to be on this show.
But he's not saying no.
But he's not saying no. So,
right.
I think it's just political. I think if this wasn't an election year, I wouldn't hear back from him because I got proof of that already. But I'm willing to.
But didn't you talk to him once before? Wasn't he you've never ever had him on?
I've never had Bob Stefanowski on, no. I've never had him on. I had.
We may not have the audience that he deems necessary.
Right.
And so
I understand. So don't take it personally.
I absolutely don't take it personally.
Right.
Because time is money, and time is very valuable in an election. Where you spend an hour of your time matters. And to spend it where no one hears you or your target audience doesn't hear you is a waste of time.
It's a waste of time, right. And again, that's why many times you don't hear the Republicans come into the urban cities because their time is very valuable. They have to do enough.
Right. I think it's a big mistake when Republicans don't come into the urban centers. At that point, the issue the issue of concern and availability trumps the time factor. The time, the perception outweighs the amount of time you think you're saving, because there's a perception that the Republicans don't want to be involved or don't care.
Right.
So that is not a good perception. It works against you. Now, at least they could say, at least he cared enough to come. That changes everything, because if people are not going to consider you if they think that you don't have any kind of good relationship in them. Well, he don't care. So at that point, who cares? But if he cares, at least now you maybe want to give him some consideration. But you have to be present for that to happen.
Yeah, but the only thing is, and I know you was able to meet with Bob Stefanowski, so you have more firsthand experience interacting with him than I do, who have never met him. But I think the community as a whole don't need just sympathy. We don't need someone to just show up. And I know he was at the parade, so that's nice. I mean, I don't want to say everything is politics, but I think realistically, political showmanship.
Well, Hartford's the state is a Democratic state.
Blue state, yes.
Hartford's a solid Democrat town. The governor is not here. No. He's just a Democrat.
Right.
He's here and he's not here. But he's a Democrat. There is animus toward Republicans in Hartford. So the fact that he's a Republican works against him. So it's not a matter of sympathy. I think he has just as much sympathy for Hartford as the governor does. But the governor's a Democrat.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? But we don't need sympathy. We need to know that you care enough to not be dismissive. And that's important.
Right.
That's very, very important. And you can't build a relationship if people have a sense that you're dismissive of them.
Yeah.
So you can't even start to go forward. And that you have to start somewhere. You got to get to B. You're at A, now you got to get to B. You're not going to get to Z all at once. To to use your example earlier?
Well, I tell you, I'm not saying I'm even 100% satisfied because I haven't even gotten the response that I haven't gotten a commitment from neither candidate.
Right.
So, what's to say Lamont is going to show up? I'm willing to believe at some point, you as a guest booker, you got to be realistic, who I'm going to be able to get and who I'm not going to be able to get. I don't have a problem playing politics. He needs the audience for whatever reason. He needs to say that he came on. He's going to be concerned enough to make a guest appearance. I'm willing to play politics on that level. We have a platform that you put together. He can provide. He's very effective, Bob Stefanowski, at pinpointing areas where the governor has not been effective. What's wrong, what he feels he would need to be able to do. He's a good X's and O's kind of individual if you listen to Bob Stefanowski very carefully. He knows how to pinpoint exactly what is wrong, where it needs to be corrected at. The governor is kind of like he's like a good speaker. He has this uplift. He knows how to uplift you with his charisma to some degree. I think a debate is going to be real interesting because I think this is where Bob Stefanowski really wants to nail Governor Lamont, getting him on a one-on-one debate. Because he's really hungry. Bob Stefanowski is hungry. He wants to become governor, and he wants to do anything in means to show that Governor Lamont is not the right governor for Connecticut. Lamont, I guess, has good advertisement. He knows how to promote the state very well. He knows how to show how he has made things better over the past 4 years. But the community, I think, as a whole, Stan, even yourself with the network, you got to ask yourself. I don't know, maybe you're not directly looking for the Lamont administration or looking for anything. I know you had some issues with black media that you feel maybe it's not being, I guess, ignored, or it just doesn't have much of a presence in Connecticut. So I don't know what role the governor administration could have on that. But I think one thing you have stated is that your message has to be heard. You have to be able to get your message out to people, and you're able to do what you're doing without the assistance of the governor administration. So I don't know what role that you feel even the administration is really would be needed for media as a black perspective in Connecticut.
Well, I think if you to be more to answer your question, black media just needs to be there when questions are presented. Mm-hmm. They need to have a seat. They need to be in the room.
Okay.
So they can report.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to be able to ask questions so that they can report. That's really all black media needs.
Mm-hmm. And right now that seems to be very limited. I do monitor Channel 30, what's the WVI? What's the news title? Channel 30 that they go by, but whatever.
NBC 30.
NBC 30. That's it. But they used to have a different
or
name.
CT 30.
Yeah, NC 30. But they seem to be more of a voice for black people in the greater Hartford area in Connecticut. I do see a lot of segments that they put together showing positive things in the black community that I don't really see on the other networks. At least I don't see as many as what I see on NBC. So give them some praise. They are at least, and I think that's what you're saying. You feel the black media needs to be heard. They need to be invited to certain things at the table. But I think you also need to be able to present what you feel is needed too. It's one thing I can listen and talk to you, but let's say if you got some ideas that you want to promote.
Well, if you have when it's not political season,
mm-hmm.
when it's just the standard season and there are events, there are press conferences where questions can be asked, is the black press invited to those events,
Right.
where you can ask critical questions that might be tough in order to get information that our community needs. And it'll be a lot easier just to not have to deal with that. So you don't invite them.
Right. Well, I mean, if you have a tool of media and it's not being able to be utilized to its full capacity, that is a problem. I mean, you want to be effective.
Well, I think black media can still be effective. It's limited because it doesn't have the fiscal resources to put forward a lot of reporters, this, that, and the third. And that's because, of course, black media is not supported financially by the community or by, major business,
Right.
for a whole myriad of reasons. But it takes resource to put out reporters. They have to be paid, and it takes time. And so that's
Well,
so we may not have that kind of reach, but we still do have our communities. Now, the black community is significant enough that there should be press releases go out to all of the black press. Now, if they don't show up, that's another thing. But if they don't know about it until they see it on the news, then there's nothing that they can do.
Well, that's even the event that you was participating in on Sterling, that you participated in on Sterling Street. I mean, had it not been you providing the coverage, that event wasn't going to be publicized. I mean,
Well, that's not true. That's not true.
it was on other media.
I like way back here in my mind, I think I saw it somewhere, but it was on the front page of the Current.
Okay, so it wasn't. All right.
So I read the story in the Current. And I'm like, wow, I need to cover this. So I covered the event. I called Kamora Harrington and asked her. Well, I didn't call her. I reached out to Kamora Harrington and asked her, would it be okay to come and document this event?
Okay.
And would it be okay with the actors and the people involved? She said yes on both. When I got there, I asked the actors if they had any problem. They said no. So I recorded and documented the event, and now it's something that people can see. I like to document those kinds of events. Now, there are very few entities that are going to come out and do something like that. There's a group of photographers that also do the same thing. And some of them were there. So there's a group of us that go out and document what goes on in the city. Otherwise, it wouldn't be documented.
Well, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
That had your network not been there, it wasn't going to have no media coverage. But you did mention that you read about it
In the Current,
on
right?
the Current.
So I only say that because the Current is major media, and it was on the front page of the Current, as I recall, Saturday's Current.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
because I found out you had put something on social media, so then I said, okay, J. Stan put this information on the event, and then you covered it, and I was able to take a look at it. Although, because like you say, sometimes you don't like the fact that the media is just outlining, and I'm at fault for this because I'll pinpoint a homicide or a crime more often than I should, than promoting something positive. So I play into the same role that the so-called media plays into. They cover the inner cities the majority of time. When something bad happens, something good happens, they're limited, and myself included. I don't promote, although I did told one of my friends about the event that I just had to work that day and I was tied up. But I did tell a friend about the event because someone used to live on our old street that was there, and it was a good positive event, and you like to do positive things. You like to outline positive things for the community.
Right.
But at the same time, if there's something every now and then that you think needs to happen, and the only reason why yesterday I put on Inbox Facebook is, okay, the young man that was killed in the club it is important to know whether he was just an innocent person or was they targeted him. Because just like, again, people will look at the fact that, well, if you caught up into this problem, this is what you expect. I mean, this is what you should expect to happen to your life. But you could be a situation of a person just going to a club or a bar, something escalates. From what I heard, a lot of gunfire was happening there. And up until this point, they don't know if the person that was killed was the intended target or not. So I just felt that still is important to know.
I guess it could be important to know. In the end of the day, it doesn't matter because he was killed. He was fatally wounded. He was killed.
Right.
So that's the ultimate thing that people now know.
Okay, but if he was just someone,
whether he was an innocent victim or the intended target, the end result is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
If he was the intended victim, that wouldn't change the fact that he was, murdered.
Right. Okay. Well,
I mean, for doing crime analysis and things along that line, you're tracking certain types of data information. No doubt that's important, and they will find that out.
Mm-hmm.
But the outcome, as far as the general public is concerned, is that someone was killed at a nightclub.
Okay. Well, sometime they will classify most police officials will tell you, particularly our spokesperson, well, most of the people that's involved in crime knows each other, which I guess that's a 90 to 95, 99% ratio.
Criminals have a little local group of folks, just like all the artists in Hartford know each other.
Right.
Even if you don't know their names, you know them.
You know them.
Because there's a circle of artists, and they go to all of the different events, and they see each other, and you start to build a little community, and you know who's who.
Right.
The criminals know who each other is.
Yeah. But I mean, they know who they're after. Most time, if they looking to retaliate or escalate something, again, that's what I'm just trying to say. They just said the police report that said they don't know if this person was the person that they attended.
I don't know.
Because I'm not a club person. Clubs are a different breed.
Mm-hmm. Lower your mic so we can see your mouth.
Oh, okay. I thought it was already.
There you go.
Yeah. Clubs are a different breed that you got to deal with security differently. Going to a sports bar or a bar, you can kind of almost let your guard down to some degree. A club brings a different element of people.
Clubs can be. I remember the very first nightclub I went to.
Mm-hmm.
I was 19 years old. A friend of mine took me there. He was much older than I was. He probably like 30 or so. I went there with two friends of mine. And I was the 19-year-old little fella. I was I just come up to Hartford. And there's these two brothers worked at Pratt Whitney. And they kind of like took me under their wing. And we went to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, now I'm going to tell you the same thing. I would tell you his name, except that I'm getting ready to say something that he said to his wife. So therefore I won't say his name. But he said, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell my wife. This is the door I will meet you at if something goes wrong.
Goes wrong, right.
If a fire starts, someone gets stabbed or shot, I'll meet you out here.
Mm-hmm.
I am not coming to look for you. I'm not looking around, wandering. I'm going to get out.
Right.
I suggest you do the same. Keep your eyes open. Be aware of where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you have to be when you're in certain places.
Right.
If you in some nightclub, where was this nightclub?
It was on Maple Avenue. I can't remember the name of the club, but it was a club.
If you were in a
Maple
nightclub where things is tight, you have to be you know, you're not at the mall.
Although things happen at malls too of late.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, everywhere you go, you have to have some situational awareness. You know, these are very trying times. They're not the worst of times, but they're trying times. And people are on edge, and people are stressed, and folk are scared. And when people are stressed, on edge, and scared, they act differently. And you could step on somebody's shoes by accident and wind up getting killed.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of these things. You keep your wits about you. Don't be intoxicated. I mean, you know, these are things that,
But
you know, you have to be careful.
But for security purposes, nightclubs supposed to screen. You're supposed to have a security
Supposed
system.
to, yeah. But
Yeah.
you know, if you want to get
A gun.
a weapon or a gun into some place, you can.
It has happened. Yup, many times. Hide it in different.
Right. Any
components.
system that's there can be circumvented
Mhm.
if that's your purpose.
Right.
Now, you say there was a lot of gunfire
Well, that's
So-
a lot of gunshots from what the report indicated.
From one person or
well,
several people.
It could have been several people. Now that you mention it, maybe it wasn't not just one people. It was some fight that had escalated. That's the best I can
Right.
tell
So
you.
you know, things get tight. People don't know how to
It was over a conflict. Like you have always mentioned.
conflict.
How
They don't know how
people-
to resolve conflict.
Yes.
So they resolve it the way most human beings do when they push to the edge. They neutralize conflict, like Cain did with his brother Abel.
Okay. And
As much as we would like to think that this stuff is new,
yeah.
it is not.
And this is why you can't get up into gun legislation and all of that, because this is just a handgun that kill. And some people will say this is your real problem more than even these certain weapons of destruction. Although those are devastating too, but the amount of gun violence that takes place every single day with just normal handguns. So are you going to bar the make of all guns as the solution? Because as you stated, Stan, it's the person behind the gun that's the problem more than the gun itself. So, you know, how people handle things and conflicts. But like you said, you got to be aware of your elements at times, because, you know, this is not a shopping open air center, although things happen there too. But you can kind of almost, you know, assume when you go into a club, there's going to be some drinking and other things going
It's just
on.
drinking, heightened tensions.
It's a different mentality.
People's egos are worn on their sleeve. Folk is trying to look good. You shame me. You embarrass me.
So,
You know, I ain't never liked you since kindergarten. You know, all these things come out, and you're not from around here.
Oh, yeah.
Who do you think you are? You know, I'm all kinds of stuff, and it's like
Quick.
that.
Right, just like
Quick.
that.
Guy's with his girlfriend, he don't want to look weak. He's with his boys, he don't want to look weak. I mean, just all kinds of stuff potentially can go wrong quickly.
I think one thing people like Reverend Brown was, and I haven't spoken to him of late, but, you know, I stay impressed with different text messages to him, is sometimes I think they want to show who these people are, you know, not say that they just lost their life in vain. I'm not talking about
Talking about the victims.
Yeah, the victims. But I'm not just talking about just the rally itself, you know, point who this person really was, you know, what type of person, good or bad, I guess, in some cases, because the first assumption is somebody gets gunned down, this person is caught up into something, you know, he got to be involved in something. And that's, again, my point is we don't know if this person was just someone who happened to go to the club, just want to socialize, and all of a sudden other groups of people started to escalate into violence with different issues.
I don't know.
That was my whole point. And I will say that it could be, I don't know your son, his patterns, but it could be somebody else's son.
I'm sure it was someone's son. It wouldn't be my son, because he doesn't go to those.
He
kinds
doesn't
of
go to
places.
clubs, but right. But I'm saying it could be some son.
He'll be walking down the street and see something odd, and then go around the block.
Go around the block. So he's not
So
even, yeah.
He's very He's very avoiding
Avoiding.
of any kind of conflict.
Conflicts, right.
Right.
And he fits into that demographic.
So he's not that.
But I'm not saying this until we really know for sure. It could have just happened to be a guy working for the week, because I had friends.
He could have just been on his way home, stopped off real quick to get a beer.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
Right. But at the end of the day,
Does it matter?
I mean, it matters. But at the end of the day, someone died.
Right.
And that's the issue. They died in a violent crime. And, we have to tone the temperature down in how we have our discords with one another and agree to disagree. And we also need to start looking at things from a more positive way. In time, if that's all you look for, that's all you see. And that's what a lot of people look for. They're looking for the negative. They're looking for an opportunity to be confrontational. It doesn't take much for it to trip. The next thing you know, someone's dead.
Right.
Because that's where we are. As a society, everything is conflict and confrontation. Whether you're watching a television program or whether it's the news report or whether it's this candidate or that candidate, everything is about confrontation. And so when we see these things act out in our society and around us, people should not be surprised.
You said something earlier, and I want to bring it back, because I mentioned something about the criminal justice system, and you said the majority of people in our society is not in the criminal justice system.
Yes.
McCauley. What's his last name? He always tell me, I keep forgetting his last name, but McCauley, Caffey, I believe his name is, or something like that. He told me the majority of people that he grew up with in his environment in the Upper Albany Avenue is either out there doing something illegal, negative. They've been shot at. They've been assaulted. Some have been killed. Some have been in and out of prison. So it sounded like to me he was knowing most of the people he knew.
That very well may be.
Was in that scenario.
That's his circle. Very small.
Very small circle, right.
Right. Most people are not in prison. Now, that doesn't mean that most of the people that someone knows, if everyone you know is involved in doing stuff wrong, then the likelihood of them being in prison eventually is quite high.
Quite high. So that circle that he was in, and other people, that's the key factor. The circle that you hang out with or that you associate with. Right.
You could find people who will be able to tell you, well, like everyone I know either has a master's degree or a bachelor's or a PhD. Everyone I know went to college. I mean, yeah, because those are the people you know. Those are the folks you hang out with. But that doesn't speak to everybody.
Right.
And when we say most people are in the prison, no, most people are not in the prison industrial complex. Most people don't make decisions that wind them up in jail.
Just the numbers. I like to go by the facts, though, the numbers itself. So if
you make, Alexa, how many people are in United States prisons?
Here's something I found on the web. According to Wikipedia.org, it is estimated that there is around 7 million people incarcerated in the United States.
7 million people.
Oh, that's a significant number, though.
Alexa, what is the population of the United States?
According to the 2020 U.S. Census, the population of the United States is 331 million people, which is a 7.1% increase over the 2010 U.S. Census.
Population is going up. Alexa, what percentage of 331 million is 7 million?
7 million is 2.115% of 331 million.
2.5%.
A low percentage
of the population is in prison. Now, while that's a significant number of people, that is not most.
Right. It's a low percentage.
A lot of people are in the prison industrial system? Yes. Most people are no, most people are not. And most people don't make decisions that land them in prison.
Would you say the impact of the 7 million people that's in the prison system is more important than the numbers itself? What impact does the 7 million people have on society more than just the numbers itself? Is more of a factor.
I can't speak to that. I would say, what impact does the society have on those 7 million? What impact do the good people in their lives have on them to prevent them from going into prison?
Right.
What impact did their mom have, their dad, their little sister, their aunties, their uncles, their pastors, their imams, their rabbis? What impact did the good people that those 7 million people know have on them?
Have on them, right.
When they were trying to talk them out of doing the criminal activities they were involved with to keep them out of prison. Yet here they are in prison. So you can see you can make the argument on both sides. We always go to, no, these people are negatively impacting their families. They're not at home. Oh, but they weren't always in prison.
Right.
And you can't tell me that there wasn't someone trying to talk some sense into them at some point. Because most people that I've talked to that have gone to prison and are out of prison can tell me about how so-and-so told them, and people tried to get them to change their ways, but they refused. So it's not like the world, and I don't mean this to be harsh or cruel, but I'm going to take a hard line on this, as I have been. These 7 million people don't set the narrative for everyone else. It's admirable that they have issues that should be championed and all of that, but they don't set the narrative. Everyone is not in prison,
but
that doesn't mean we should turn our backs on anybody. But let's keep things in perspective. That's all I'm saying, and I'm not willing to yield the floor to those who are doing wrong and somehow deify them as the new divine order that gets to supersede everything good that's going on in society.
Well, it may not set the tone, but I've heard reports that future construction prison dollars are looked at for young people as low as the 3rd grade. So I don't know if that's setting the tone or not. But when you're hearing reports that they are gauging future construction prison funding, however they allocate the money towards monitoring kids in the 3rd grade, meaning they can see from kids in the 3rd grade where they're going to be at, and they'll be at some point in the criminal justice system, because they wouldn't be looking at that.
Well, that's something that's been done for a long time.
For a long time.
But unfortunately, you do have to, forecast not just prison growth, but also hospital growth, school growth, where businesses are likely to emerge, housing. All these things are forecast by individuals who take a look at these trends. And I've been corrected by one of our viewers, said 7 million in prison is incorrect. I take this person's, because this person's involved in this in this area in many ways. It says, I'm watching your show. 7 million in prison is incorrect. It's around 2.2 million. The key point is that both the absolute numbers and the per capita imprisonment rate have skyrocketed over the past few decades. This is the largest system of mass imprisonment in human history, both in absolute and per capita terms. That is absolutely true. And quite frankly, that's what we should be speaking to, not the numbers and most. So my correction is in the most. And so as we see, most people are, no, 2.2 is significantly less than 7 million.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about the number of people per capita of color in prison, that's a different subject.
Yeah.
And how those things are impacted, the number of indigenous people in prison, and the fact that the United States has the largest mass incarceration number of countries in the world. So we have problems, and our problems are are deep. And those problems can be resolved if we resolve to resolve them. There's no will to make life better for people. And I think there's a myriad of reasons and myriad of ways to address these issues. But for the most part, we're not addressing the issue.
Well, I think the numbers you just stated about the black population could be more even relevant, because there was a report when I was graduating high school. They did the rap album Self-Destruction 88, 89. And if you look at that video, you'll see in America, 1 out of 4 black men is either in prison, probation, or parole, or something that they outlined about that. And then I thought 10 or 15 years later, the numbers went from 1 in 4 black men either in prison, probation, or parole to 1 in 3. I don't know if that's the accurate, up-to-date stat now of how many black men per population is either in prison, probation, or parole.
Well, let's say whatever the number is, it's too many.
That's what I'm saying. So maybe it's more relevant that you look at the race of people that's in prison and the criminal justice system as the whole. That's 2 million.
I would say it's important to look at the race in the context of why they're there.
Exactly.
And so I think race becomes very relevant when you look at the correctional system and who's being treated certain ways and what the rationale for individuals being there. Because if you're seen as a criminal as opposed to someone who has a problem, then criminal measures are used to deal with you. The prison industrial complex is a multi-billion-dollar business. And like all businesses, you need, they're in it for the profit. One thing you need are prisoners. So, you vilify one group of people and you arrest and detain and imprison one group because you see them as subhuman or criminal, and the other group, oh, well, he has a little behavioral problem, let him go, So there are these kinds of things, but these are all policies that are put into place by people elected to positions of power.
But the key word you said is why, though. See, I always me, I like to know why something happened. So you just said
I like to know why in an effort to get to a solution. I don't want to know why just because I want to know.
Okay, I understand.
Because lots of people want to know why. Right. Now, what are you going to do with the why?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there is anything we can do. No, then I don't even want to know why then. The why has to lead to a solution.
A solution, right. Right.
Why did the plane crash? Now we know what we have to do to fix it so that never happens again. Not we hear why and just keep on going about our business.
Right.
So the why has to lead to something. I always want to know, where are we going so that we, where are we going with the conversation so we can bring about a change? Other than that, it's just talk.
Yeah.
It's more than talk.
Yeah, well, I tell you, man, I have a guest book for next week. I think some of these issues that we just talked about is going to be addressed. I'm just going to fine tune.
You're getting lower lower and lower.
So that's okay. Well, I want to keep the full head shot.
I can lower the camera because you keep lowering. If you sit up, I'll raise the camera up.
Okay, my fault. See, well, I've been sitting for 3 hours, Stan, so you got to make yourself. This is a long time
to
be sitting. But, we have
Well, you good. I mean, I can raise the camera.
Okay. So
you was way up here in the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Now you down. You slipping down in it.
I got to be more private. For 3 hours, you got to be adjusted to yourself. Interesting topic. Again, I think next week's show is going to cover some of these areas that we just discussed towards the end of a major city in the United States. But I think, like you said, why towards a solution is the key. I mean, why a person is in prison, what led up to that, so what could be done to prevent him from getting back into that. I mean, knowing why. Okay.
Well, the why on that end is a little bit different. There are systems in place to make sure that people wind up in prison that really ought not be there. But that's another subject for another day. I'm sure we'll talk about that probably next week.
Right.
Because, you know.
So let's look on things. I mean, I don't know if you got a plan. I need to know. We can talk about this off of the air or on the air about later.
We already had the after show conversation. We could talk another hour. I'm just messing with you.
Okay. Well, I want to get my September schedule going in order, so we got to talk about that.
Okay.
So, okay.
All right, my friends. Our time together has come to an end. We'll see you all here next time. Great show, Mr. Small.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great guest. And special thanks to our guest, Captain Levy, for joining us. You all have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye.